The honest deceiver paradox. Imagine a person who boldly declares, "I always lie." At first, this might seem like a simple statement, an odd confession perhaps, but nothing more. Yet, when you stop and truly consider the words, a trap of logic reveals itself, a snare that ensnares your very capacity to judge truth and falsehood. This is the essence of the honest deceiver paradox, a timeless riddle that twists the mind into endless loops of doubt and contradiction. If the statement, "I always lie," is true, then the speaker must indeed always lie. But if they always lie, then their claim here is a lie. This means the statement is false. So, the statement cannot be true without simultaneously being false. Conversely, if the statement is false, it means that the speaker does not always lie. They must sometimes tell the truth. But if that is so, then the original statement, "I always lie," is false, which supports the idea that sometimes the speaker tells the truth. This oscillation continues indefinitely, creating a paradoxical spiral where truth and falsehood chase each other endlessly. This paradox is more than just a linguistic curiosity or a philosophical puzzle. It strikes at the heart of how we understand truth, language, and trust. It forces us to confront the limitations of binary thinking, the rigid division of statements into simply true or false. It exposes the fragile foundation upon which our communication and comprehension rest. When faced with the honest deceiver, we enter a liminal space where certainty evaporates and doubt reigns supreme. To grasp the full intensity of this paradox, consider its roots in the ancient tradition of logical puzzles. One of the earliest known references comes from Epimenides, a Cretan philosopher who allegedly said, "All Cretans are liars." This statement led to a similar logical tangle. If Epimenides, a Cretan himself, is telling the truth, then his assertion that all Cretans lie would include himself, thereby contradicting the truthfulness of his own statement. This ancient seed blossomed into the classic liar paradox we wrestle with today. But why does this paradox grip us so deeply? It's because the paradox destabilizes the very mechanism we rely on to navigate reality. Our minds crave consistency and clarity. When someone speaks, we instinctively categorize their statement as either true or false to make sense of the world and decide how to act. The honest deceiver disrupts this process, turning our cognitive compass into a spinning wheel. Now, think about the practical implications. Suppose you meet someone who claims, "I always lie." How do you respond? If you trust their words, you must conclude they lie, which means their claim is false, so they don't always lie. If you distrust their words, you believe the claim to be false, which means they sometimes tell the truth. Either way, your belief about their honesty becomes unstable. This instability has profound consequences in social interaction, law, and ethics, where trust and truth are pillars of cooperation and justice. Consider the political realm, where rhetoric often blurs the lines between truth and deception. A politician who habitually manipulates facts might be said to embody the spirit of the honest deceiver. When their statements are met with skepticism, the public faces a similar dilemma: how to discern truth from falsehood when the speaker's reliability is in question. The paradox serves as a metaphor for the erosion of trust in institutions and the chaos that ensues when certainty breaks down. The paradox also resonates deeply in the realm of artificial intelligence and machine learning. As AI systems become more autonomous and complex, questions arise about the truthfulness and reliability of their outputs. An AI designed to deceive or manipulate could produce outputs that mimic the honest deceiver paradox, challenging users to decode intent and veracity in a flood of data. This pushes us to rethink not only human communication, but also the frameworks we use to interpret machine-generated information. From a philosophical standpoint, the honest deceiver forces us to reconsider the foundations of logic itself. Classical logic, based on the principle of bivalence, insists that every proposition is either true or false, with no middle ground. The liar paradox undermines this by presenting a statement that defies this binary categorization. This has inspired alternative logical systems, such as paraconsistent logic and fuzzy logic, which allow for statements to be both true and false, or somewhere in between. These systems offer tools to navigate paradoxes that classical logic cannot resolve, expanding our conceptual toolbox for understanding truth. The paradox also echoes in the psychological realm. Humans are prone to cognitive dissonance, where conflicting beliefs coexist uneasily within the mind. Encountering a statement like, "I always lie," evokes that dissonance, forcing us to hold contradictory ideas simultaneously and triggering discomfort. This psychological tension mirrors the logical contradiction and underscores how deeply intertwined language, thought, and emotion are. Now, let us explore a hypothetical scenario to illustrate the paradox's grip. Imagine a courtroom where a witness claims, "Everything I say is a lie." The judge and jury are tasked with assessing the reliability of this testimony. If they accept it as true, then all statements made by the witness, including this very claim, are lies, rendering the testimony worthless. If they reject it as false, then the witness sometimes tells the truth, so parts of their testimony may be credible. The paradox paralyzes the court's ability to judge, emphasizing the practical stakes of such logical puzzles. Yet, there are ways to soften the paradox. One approach is to interpret the statement, "I always lie," as self-defeating rhetoric rather than a literal truth claim. The speaker may be making a playful or ironic assertion, a linguistic trick, rather than a factual statement. Alternatively, we might consider context. No person can literally lie in every utterance, as that would involve a performative contradiction. Recognizing this, we understand that some statements are inherently unstable and serve more to provoke thought than convey factual information. Another perspective comes from pragmatics, the study of language use in context. Here, the paradox invites us to look beyond literal truth values and consider speaker intention, audience interpretation, and the function of language. In everyday conversation, utterances are rarely judged solely on their truthfulness. They also serve social, emotional, and performative roles. The honest deceiver's statement might function as a joke, a warning, or a test, revealing as much about human communication as about logic. The paradox also shines a light on the limits of language. Words, though powerful, can fail to capture the full complexity of meaning and reality. The liar paradox exploits these limits, showing that language is not a flawless tool, but a human invention with inherent constraints and ambiguities. This realization invites humility and curiosity in how we use words and interpret statements. Ultimately, the honest deceiver paradox challenges us to embrace uncertainty and complexity. It warns against rigid categorization and invites us to think flexibly, to recognize the shades of gray that color truth and deception. It teaches that some questions resist neat answers, and that the pursuit of understanding often leads us into paradoxical territory. In a world where information overload, fake news, and deepfakes complicate our quest for truth, the honest deceiver's lesson is more relevant than ever. It reminds us to question, to doubt, to seek context, and to accept that not all contradictions can be resolved easily. It encourages intellectual humility and vigilance in the face of ambiguous claims. So, next time someone tells you, "I always lie," remember the profound puzzle wrapped in those words. They invite you into an infinite dance of truth and falsehood, a mirror reflecting the limits of logic and the depths of human communication. And in that dance, you glimpse the beautiful complexity of language, thought, and reality itself. The liar's mirror reflection. You say you're telling the truth. You say it with all the force of conviction, with all the certainty your voice can muster, with a gaze that's steady and a heartbeat you hope doesn't betray you. But something strange happens when you stare too long into the mirror of your own assurance. Certainty, real, raw certainty, has a way of blinding you to the cracks in your own reflection. The more you insist you're honest, the more that insistence becomes its own prison, a looping feedback that offers comfort but no proof. It's the liar's mirror, a surface that only ever reflects your own belief, never the reality behind it. Imagine a world where every time you claimed something was true, the only evidence you could offer was the strength of your own conviction. No witnesses, no documents, no outside checks, just you, standing in front of yourself, repeating, "I am right, I am right, I am right." At first, this might feel empowering. Your confidence becomes its own argument, your passion a shield against doubt. But look closer. The mirror doesn't test your claim. It doesn't ask questions. It simply bounces your own image back at you, perfectly, infinitely, and emptily. Think about the last time you were absolutely sure of something. So sure, in fact, that you couldn't even entertain the possibility you might be wrong. Maybe it was an argument with a friend about a memory you were convinced was real. Maybe it was a gut feeling, a flash of insight, a moral stance you would defend to the grave. In that moment, your certainty felt like proof. But was it? Or was it just a reflection of your own need to believe? This is the paradox at the heart of the liar's mirror. Every time you insist on your own honesty, every time you reinforce your position with conviction alone, you're really just staring deeper into your own reflection. The mirror can show you your belief, your confidence, even your sincerity, but it cannot show you the truth itself. It can only show you that you believe, nothing more, nothing less. We see this everywhere in human life. In courtrooms, a defendant's unwavering testimony may sway a jury, not because it is evidence, but because it is passionate. In politics, a leader's self-assurance becomes the rallying cry for followers, who conflate certainty with correctness. In relationships, a lover's repeated insistence of fidelity may either comfort or, paradoxically, arouse suspicion, because insistence itself is not proof. Even in our own minds, we replay memories, repeating our versions until they feel real, even if they were built on shaky ground. Psychologists call this belief perseverance. Once you've adopted a belief, especially one tied to your sense of self, your mind will defend it with an army of justifications. Every time you repeat your truth, it echoes louder in your head, drowning out the doubts, smoothing over the inconsistencies. You build a hall of mirrors, each reflection confirming the last, until the original source is lost. The more you say, "I am honest," the more your identity fuses with the claim, until the difference between what is real and what is simply repeated becomes impossible to separate. But the mirror is a trap. Consider the parable of the liar's paradox. This sentence is false. If it's true, it's false. If it's false, it's true. The liar's mirror is more insidious. It doesn't trip you with a logical loop. Instead, it seduces you into equating feeling with fact, confidence with correctness. It gives you the comfort of seeing your conviction reflected back, endlessly, but never lets you escape the glass. Look at the history of science. The most dangerous obstacle to discovery has never been ignorance. It's been certainty. The greatest scientists were not those who shouted their beliefs into the void, but those who were willing to let the mirror crack, to let doubt in. Galileo saw moons around Jupiter and risked heresy by questioning what the entire world took for granted. Darwin's doubts about the fixity of species led him down the path to evolution. Each time, progress was made not by shouting, "I am right," louder, but by asking, "But what if I'm wrong?" The liar's mirror does not want questions. It wants certainty. And so, it breeds delusion. The more certain you are, without testing, without evidence, without the painful humility of doubt, the more you slip into a world made only of your own reflections. You might convince yourself you are honest, but honesty without challenge, without the acid test of reality, is nothing more than a polished self-portrait. Let's get personal for a moment. Think about something you believe right now that feels unshakable. Maybe it's about who you are, a good person, a loyal friend, someone who always means well. Maybe it's about the world, a principle, a cause, a memory you revisit when you need reassurance. How much of that belief comes from real tested experience, and how much comes from the mirror? How many times have you repeated that belief to yourself, each time reinforcing not its truth, but its familiarity? When was the last time you risked shattering your own image by asking the dangerous question, "What if I'm wrong?" Even in relationships, the liar's mirror plays its cruelest tricks. Lovers promise, "I would never hurt you." Friends swear, "I would never betray you." Parents vow, "I only want what's best." But when those words are repeated over and over, without the courage to let actions speak, they can become walls rather than bridges. The more you insist, the less you allow real vulnerability in. The mirror grows thicker, the reflection sharper, the reality further away. In philosophy, this dilemma has haunted thinkers for centuries. Descartes famously doubted everything he could, until he reached the one thing he couldn't doubt, his own doubting. Cogito, ergo sum. But even here, the liar's mirror whispers, how do you know you're not deceiving yourself? How do you know your certainty is anything more than a trick of reflection? In everyday life, the consequences are quieter, but just as powerful. People fall for scams because the con artist is so confident. Leaders gain power because they sound so sure. We lie to ourselves about habits, about love, about what we truly want, because it's easier to stare into a familiar mirror than to step outside and see the raw, messy truth. But there is hope. The mirror, after all, is not reality. It's only a tool. You can use it to check your appearance, but you cannot live in it. The real test of honesty is not how certain you sound, but how open you are to being wrong. It's the willingness to let the mirror shatter, to pick up the shards, to see yourself not as a finished portrait, but as a work in progress. True honesty is not a perfect reflection. It's the courage to face yourself without illusions. So, next time you find yourself insisting, "I am telling the truth," pause. Ask, is this conviction, or is this just my reflection? Am I seeking truth or just comfort? Am I willing to let someone else hold up a different mirror, one that might show me something I'd rather not see? Only then does honesty become real. Only then do you escape the endless loop of the liar's mirror. Because in the end, certainty is not the enemy of truth, but unchecked certainty is. The mirror can help you see yourself, but it cannot prove you're right. Only reality can do that. Only doubt, humility, and the willingness to be questioned can break the spell. If you want to be truly honest, step away from the glass and let your truth be tested, not just reflected. The verified fabrication loop. Imagine a world where every truth can be faked, every lie can be proven, and every piece of evidence is a pawn in a game no one can ever truly win. This is the verified fabrication loop, a reality in which the very act of verifying a fact becomes a new frontier for deception. The more we chase proof, the more we open the door to deeper, subtler layers of fiction. Every time you try to untangle a lie, you find yourself caught in a web where the difference between what's real and what's forged grows thinner, more fragile, until proof itself becomes part of the illusion. It begins with a simple suspicion. Someone claims a thing happened. A photo, a video, a document, a memory. We turn to evidence, to verification, believing that facts will save us. But technology has changed the rules. Deepfakes can put words in any mouth, fabricate footage from nothing, stitch together moments that never happened. Digital signatures, once the gold standard of authenticity, can now be mimicked, subverted, or generated by artificial intelligence. Even eyewitness accounts, so central to human justice, are contaminated by bias, by memory's fallibility, or by digital tampering. In this world, proof is no longer an anchor. It's a stage, and everyone is acting. As soon as the public learns evidence can be faked, suspicion infects everything. Every shocking video, every damning recording, every leak or whistleblower's proof is met with the question, is it real or just another fabrication? The liar, when cornered, only has to say, that's a fake, that's a deep fake, that's forged. Suddenly the burden shifts. Now, proof must prove itself. And even then, the process of verification can itself be imitated, corrupted, or faked. When the proof that something is false is as easy to fabricate as the original lie, you enter an endless spiral, a hall of mirrors where trust, once broken, can never be restored. History is littered with smaller versions of this loop. Consider forged paintings exposed by forged certificates. Think about political scandals built on manufactured evidence, only to have the proof of forgery itself turn out to be fraudulent. Even DNA evidence, once thought infallible, can be planted, altered, or mishandled. But the digital age has taken this paradox to new extremes. Now, you can forge the proof of a lie, and then forge the proof that the forgery is real, over and over, until no one can ever be certain. The line between investigator and manipulator vanishes, and the loop feeds on itself, growing ever tighter, ever more consuming. Philosophers warn of this spiral, the epistemic crisis where knowledge itself becomes contaminated. In the verified fabrication loop, every layer of evidence spawns a new layer of uncertainty. The more we invent tools to verify, the more those tools themselves become targets. The paradox is brutal. To demand proof is to open the possibility that all proof can be manufactured. The system designed to deliver certainty instead creates infinite doubt. The consequences are profound. Justice falters, trust collapses, conspiracy thrives. In a world where nothing can be definitively proven or disproven, the loudest voice wins. The most convincing narrative takes root. Fact and fiction blur, mutate, merge. Some stop believing anything. Others cling to their side's version, weaponizing suspicion as a shield. The verified fabrication loop is not just a technical glitch. It is a psychological chasm. It breeds paranoia, cynicism, fatalism. It erodes community and common ground. Everyone becomes their own investigator, their own jury, their own god of reality. In this spiral, even the tools we build to defend truth can be turned against us. Cryptography, blockchain, even eyewitness live streams, none are immune to attack or doubt. The very idea of receipts becomes farce when every receipt can be counterfeited. We begin to crave a simpler time, when proof was tactile, when trust was not endlessly deferred. But the world won't go backward. We are left to navigate a future where every verification is haunted by the possibility of fabrication, and every fact is shadowed by its own undoing. And so, the verified fabrication loop endures. A Mobius strip of belief and disbelief, proof and invention, reality and performance. In the end, the only certainty is uncertainty itself, and the only way forward is to admit how fragile, how desperately human, our hunger for the truth really is. The sincere imposter illusion. Imagine for a moment that someone looks you in the eye, their voice trembling, their words spilling out with the weight of truth. Maybe it's an apology. Maybe it's a confession, a declaration of love, a story about a wound so raw you can feel it in the pit of your stomach. Their face is open. Their tone is right. You believe them, because how could you not? Sincerity, we think, is unmistakable. But what if it's not? What if, hidden behind those trembling words, there is no truth at all, only the perfect illusion of it? This is the heart of the sincere imposter illusion, a falsehood delivered so flawlessly that it is emotionally indistinguishable from the real thing. The line between sincerity and deception dissolves, and suddenly, you're left questioning not just the other person, but your own ability to tell the difference. We want to believe we're good judges of truth. We want to think we can spot the liar, the faker, the pretender, especially when it matters most. But studies in psychology, stories from real life, and our own secret doubts all tell us otherwise. The human brain is wired for trust, not for constant suspicion. Sincerity, after all, is not a list of features you can check off. It's a feeling, an impression, a gut reaction built from countless microsignals. Eye contact, tone, posture, word choice, timing. The problem is, a skilled imposter can mimic every one of those signals. In fact, sometimes the people who have the most to hide are the ones who've spent their whole lives learning exactly how to seem sincere. Think of the classic stories of con artists, spies, double agents, people who can inhabit a lie so fully that even those closest to them are left in the dark. But it's not just the realm of crime or espionage. The sincere imposter illusion lives in everyday life. It's the friend who fabricates a crisis to win your sympathy, the coworker who apologizes for a mistake they have no intention of correcting, the lover who weeps with you over a heartbreak they never really felt. In each case, the performance is perfect. The words are right. The emotion is real, or at least it feels real to you. And that's what makes this illusion so dangerous. We respond to sincerity not with logic, but with empathy. We let down our guard. We invite the imposter into our trust. The power of the sincere imposter illusion is not just in the act of deception, but in the confusion it sows inside us. When you realize you've been fooled by a perfectly convincing lie, you start to doubt your own instincts. Was it the way they smiled? The catch in their voice? Did you ignore a warning sign? Or was there truly nothing to see? The aftermath is a haunting kind of self-betrayal, a fear that you will never again be able to separate truth from pretense. You look back at every moment of trust and wonder. Was it all just a trick of performance? What's even more unsettling is that the imposter can sometimes fool themselves too. Psychologists talk about self-deception, a phenomenon where someone convinces themselves of a falsehood so deeply that their own body language, emotions, and memories align with the lie. They pass every test of sincerity because, in that moment, they truly believe what they're saying. This blurring of reality isn't just a trick of the mind, it's a defense mechanism, a way to survive in a world where honesty is sometimes too painful to bear. The imposter and the sincere person are not always enemies. Sometimes they are one and the same. In the digital age, the sincere imposter illusion has become even more potent. Online, we craft personas with a few clicks, a profile picture, a status update, a carefully edited story. We share confessions, apologies, declarations, and heartbreaks with the whole world watching, and it becomes nearly impossible to separate the authentic from the performed. The more convincing the performance, the more likely we are to believe it, to react to it, to let it change our own emotions and choices. Viral scams, fake charities, deep fakes, and manipulative influencers thrive in this landscape, preying on our hardwired response to apparent sincerity. But there's a deeper layer to this illusion, a philosophical one. If a false confession produces the same emotional response in the listener as a true one, if the tears, the words, and the pain are all identical, what then is the difference? Is sincerity measured by what is felt or by what is true? Can we ever really know the interior world of another person, or are we all, to some degree, acting, hoping to be believed, terrified of being unmasked, but never fully certain ourselves? This uncertainty cuts both ways. If you can be fooled by a perfect lie, does that mean you've also doubted the genuine moments in your life? How many apologies, confessions, and declarations have you dismissed as insincere, only to discover later that they were real? The sincere imposter illusion is not just a tool for deceivers. It's a shadow that haunts every act of communication, a ghost at the feast of human connection. The heart of the illusion is this: in the absence of objective proof, sincerity becomes a matter of faith. You choose to believe. You trust the trembling voice, the open face, the story that fits your own longing for connection. And when that trust is shattered, it hurts in a way nothing else can. Because it's not just the imposter who has lied to you, it's your own heart, your own instincts, your own deepest need to find something real in a world built on performance. So, what can we do in the face of this illusion? We can become cynical, armored, suspicious of every confession, every apology, every promise. Or we can accept that sincerity and deception are two sides of the same coin, and that vulnerability is always a risk. We can recognize the power of empathy, to heal, to connect, to make us human, even when it sometimes leads us astray. The sincere imposter illusion will never be fully defeated. But perhaps, by knowing it exists, we can be a little wiser, a little kinder, and a little more forgiving, both of others and of ourselves. In the end, the sincere imposter illusion is a mirror, reflecting back the best and worst of our nature. It shows us how much we need to believe, how much we want to be believed, and how fragile the line is between the two. It asks us to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty, to love and trust and open ourselves anyway, knowing that sometimes the truth wears a mask, and sometimes the mask is all we have. The recursive denial engine. The recursive denial engine is not just a rhetorical trick. It's a mind game that twists language into a labyrinth. When someone says, "I never denied that," the denial folds in on itself, multiplying like mirrors reflecting mirrors, creating a hall of infinite echoes. On the surface, it sounds innocuous, even reasonable, a simple clarification. But beneath that surface, the phrase is an engine, churning out layers of paradox, spinning the act of denial into its own hidden admission. Every repetition, every dodge, is a confession disguised as defense. Weaponized denial is an art of misdirection. It doesn't just hide the truth, it fractures it. Each denial references another denial, creating a maze with no clear entrance or exit. "I never denied that" becomes "I only denied denying," which becomes I never said that." The more you probe, the more you realize the logic is circular, a snake eating its own tail. The act of denial becomes the evidence of the thing denied. This recursive structure creates a strange kind of confession, a negative space where the truth lives in what is not directly said. The more elaborate the denial, the more suspicious the silence between the words. It's not just about saying no, it's about building an edifice of negation so complex that the very act of maintaining it reveals what the speaker is trying to bury. The recursive denial engine turns language into camouflage, but camouflage is only needed when there's something worth hiding. Consider a politician caught in controversy. When cornered, the denial is rarely simple. Instead, it mutates. "I never denied that I was aware," or "I only denied knowing the details." Each clause adds a new layer, pushing the truth further away, but leaving a breadcrumb trail of self-doubt. The recursive denial doesn't resolve, it spirals. The listener is left dizzy, uncertain. Did they admit something? Did they deny it? Or is the denial itself a confession dressed as ambiguity? In interpersonal relationships, this engine can be just as corrosive. Someone says, "I never said I didn't love you." On the surface, it's not an admission, but the recursion, denying the denial, hints at something unspoken, a feeling too complex or too painful to state outright. The recursive denial becomes a mirror of the emotional labyrinth we build to avoid uncomfortable truths. At its heart, the recursive denial engine is a paradox. To maintain the denial, one must constantly reference the possibility of the thing being denied. It's as if each no points to a yes lurking just out of sight. The mind struggles to resolve the contradiction, and in that struggle, a hidden truth emerges. Not in what is said, but in the need to keep saying it. The very energy spent denying becomes the proof of what's being hidden. This phenomenon is ancient. Socrates played with similar paradoxes, asking questions that revealed his opponent's self-contradictions. Freud saw denial as a defense mechanism, a way for the psyche to wall off uncomfortable realities. But the stronger the denial, the more it hinted at the power of what was being suppressed. Today in politics, media, even personal arguments, the recursive denial engine is everywhere, a signal that where there's smoke, there may well be fire. Think about how easily this plays out online. A celebrity tweets, "I never denied supporting the cause." Commenters pick apart the statement, finding meaning not in the words themselves, but in what the denial implies. The recursive engine invites interpretation, speculation, and suspicion. Every attempt to clarify becomes another turn of the screw, another loop in the paradox. The recursive denial engine doesn't end with words. It infects thought itself. The more you tell yourself, "I'm not afraid," the more you hint at fear. "I'm not angry" becomes, "I'm angry about being accused of anger." The loops grow, tangling the self in webs of unspoken truth. Denial, in this recursive form, is not an escape from confession. It is confession, encoded in negation, always circling the truth it cannot quite name. In the end, the recursive denial engine leaves us with a chilling lesson. The effort to hide often reveals more than silence ever could. The paradox is that denial, repeated and layered, becomes the very evidence it wants to erase, a hidden confession waiting for anyone who knows how to listen for the echoes. The reversed confirmation trap. Imagine a moment where someone insists on proving their honesty. They lay out evidence, they repeat their declarations, they go to great lengths to convince you they are truthful. Yet paradoxically, this very act of proving their honesty can have the opposite effect. Instead of inspiring trust, it can trigger suspicion. This is the core of the reversed confirmation trap. If you must prove you're honest, you already appear untrustworthy because genuine truth requires no defense in the first place. At its heart, this paradox challenges our understanding of trust, authenticity, and communication. It reveals an unsettling dynamic in human interaction, a dance between appearance and reality, between proof and belief. The moment someone feels compelled to validate their integrity, the listener's instinct may lean toward doubt rather than acceptance. This phenomenon is rooted deep within psychology, social dynamics, and the subtle cues that govern trustworthiness. To fully grasp this, consider how trust functions in everyday life. Trust is a silent contract, an unspoken agreement that certain truths are taken at face value. When someone speaks honestly, their words align with their behavior, their past reliability, and an intuitive sense of authenticity. This alignment creates what we call credibility, a currency far more valuable than any spoken proof. In this context, the need to overtly prove honesty becomes unnecessary. Truth speaks for itself. However, when a person insists on proving their honesty, it introduces a dissonance. Why the need to prove? What is being hidden or questioned? This triggers a subtle alarm in the listener's mind. They begin to wonder if the person's words are a mask, a performance designed to manipulate perception. The proof itself becomes evidence of suspicion, an unintended confession that trust is lacking. Take, for example, a political figure who constantly assures the public of their honesty. Each speech is punctuated with declarations like, "I swear to you," or "Believe me, I tell the truth." Rather than reinforcing trust, these repeated assertions often backfire. The more they insist, the more the public wonders what is being concealed. The proof becomes a shadow that deepens doubt. This dynamic extends beyond politics. In personal relationships, if a partner repeatedly insists, "I am honest with you," It may raise red flags rather than soothe anxieties. The listener may question what lies beneath the insistence and whether past behavior contradicts these declarations. In contrast, when honesty is consistent and unforced, it flows naturally and requires no spotlight. Psychologically, this phenomenon ties into the principle of pragmatic implicature, where listeners infer unstated meanings from what is said and how it is said. If a statement includes unnecessary proof of honesty, the listener's mind may fill the gap with suspicion. This is linked to the concept of scarcity in trust. The rarer genuine honesty is perceived to be, the more suspicious repeated claims become. The reversed confirmation trap also connects with the idea of overcompensation. When someone feels their honesty is doubted, they may overcompensate with excessive proof, creating a paradoxical spiral. The more they defend their integrity, the more they appear insecure, and the more suspicion grows. This is a social feedback loop that can erode relationships, reputations, and even self-esteem. Consider the example of an employee accused of misconduct, who desperately tries to prove their innocence through lengthy explanations and unsolicited evidence. While their intent is to clear their name, the overemphasis on proving honesty can lead observers to suspect guilt. The suspicion latches onto the very efforts to dispel it, a cruel twist of social judgment. Philosophically, this paradox challenges the assumption that proof equals truth. It highlights that truth is not solely established through evidence, but through a complex interplay of context, perception, and relational history. Truth demands no defense because it is self-evident within authentic interactions. When it requires proof, it loses its essence. This leads us to question the nature of proof itself. Proof is a tool, an external mechanism designed to convince others, but trust is an internal state, nurtured over time through consistency, transparency, and vulnerability. When proof replaces these foundational elements, it becomes a fragile facade, susceptible to skepticism. The paradox is reminiscent of the Cassandra complex from Greek mythology, where Cassandra was cursed to utter true prophecies that no one believed. Her truth, though undeniable, required no proof. Yet, it was rejected because of perception and disbelief. The reversed confirmation trap echoes this tragic tension between truth and trust. Modern technology amplifies this paradox. In a world of deepfakes, misinformation, and manipulated realities, the demand for proof has skyrocketed. Yet the flood of evidence can breed fatigue and cynicism. When everyone must prove their honesty constantly, the signal of truth becomes noise, and trust erodes universally. Social media is a battleground for this dynamic. Influencers, brands, and individuals are compelled to curate images of authenticity and transparency, often through staged declarations and public proofs. The more they proclaim honesty, the more savvy audiences question the genuineness. Here, the paradox plays out in digital form, with profound implications for identity and credibility. Understanding the reversed confirmation trap invites us to reflect on how we build and perceive trust. It warns against reliance on overt proof as a substitute for genuine integrity. It reminds us that honesty is most powerful when it is effortless and inherent, not manufactured or defended aggressively. This does not mean that evidence or accountability are irrelevant. On the contrary, transparency and openness are vital for trust, especially in complex systems. But proof must serve as a complement to authenticity, not a replacement. When proof becomes the main pillar, it signals an underlying fracture in trust. To navigate this trap, one must cultivate trustworthiness through actions, consistency, and humility rather than words alone. Let truth be lived, not loudly proclaimed. Let integrity be witnessed in behavior rather than shouted from rooftops. In conclusion, the reversed confirmation trap exposes a profound tension in human communication. The moment we must prove our honesty, we inadvertently suggest that trust is absent. Genuine truth does not demand defense because it resonates naturally within relationships and society. When defense is required, suspicion takes root, creating a cycle difficult to break. This paradox challenges us to reconsider how we approach trust in a world increasingly fractured by doubt. It calls for authenticity grounded in action, patience, and vulnerability. Only then can trust flourish without the corrosive need for constant proof. Next time you feel compelled to prove your honesty, pause and ask, does this need arise from genuine transparency or from fear of doubt? Recognize that sometimes silence and consistent truthfulness speak louder than words ever could. In that space, trust grows, unforced, unshaken, and real. And the belief feedback circuit. What is truth? We often imagine it as something absolute, unchanging, independent of our minds, a mountain standing firm against the storm of doubt and deception. But what if truth is not always a solitary mountain? What if sometimes truth is a vast, swirling crowd, a storm of collective belief so powerful that it shapes reality itself? This is the essence of the belief feedback circuit, the phenomenon where enough people believing a lie causes that lie to become effectively real. A lie, once mass believed, ceases to be just fiction. It gains a life of its own, a force that bends reality in its favor. At first glance, it sounds absurd. How can something false become true just because many people choose to believe it? Isn't truth supposed to be anchored in facts, evidence, in the bedrock of objective reality? Yes, ideally. But human society rarely operates in ideal conditions. Instead, it dances on the fragile tightrope between fact and perception, between what is and what is accepted as real. And when enough minds lock together in belief, the boundary between reality and fiction blurs, and sometimes fiction wins. Think about money. The paper bills, the digital numbers in accounts, they are fundamentally worthless on their own. A piece of paper is just paper, a number on a screen just digits. Yet, we accept these as valuable because millions agree they have value. It is the collective belief that creates an economic truth. Without this mass consensus, currency is meaningless. Here, belief is not just perception. It becomes functional reality. The money has power because we say it does. The belief feedback circuit functions similarly in social narratives. Consider rumors, myths, urban legends. They spread from person to person, growing, changing, solidifying into accepted knowledge. A story once dismissed as impossible or false can become common sense when enough people retell it with certainty. The belief grows stronger with each repetition, echoing back into itself, feeding off its own momentum. Soon, entire communities accept something that was never factually true as a lived reality. History is littered with examples. False accusations have toppled governments, destroyed reputations, ignited wars. Sometimes the original falsehood matters less than the belief it inspires. Once a lie gains enough believers, it reshapes politics, culture, and even personal identities. This isn't just theory. It's observable human behavior. Cognitive biases like confirmation bias, social proof, and groupthink drive us deeper into these feedback loops. We seek others who share our beliefs, ignoring dissenting facts that threaten the comfortable consensus. Take propaganda, for instance. Totalitarian regimes excel at manufacturing belief circuits. They flood the public sphere with messages so repetitive and unanimous that the line between truth and propaganda disappears. When the state controls the narrative, what the people believe becomes law. It's not just control of information, it's control of reality. The collective acceptance of lies turns those lies into the fabric of everyday life. But the belief feedback circuit isn't limited to authoritarian states or mass media. It operates in smaller, subtler ways every day. Social media amplifies it exponentially. Algorithms feed us content aligned with our pre-existing beliefs, creating echo chambers where a single idea, no matter how unfounded, can seem universal. Likes, shares, retweets become the currency of truth validation. When your feed overflows with one version of reality, the mind accepts it. Not because it's true, but because everyone else agrees. The circuit loops endlessly, belief breeding more belief. This phenomenon also explains the rise of conspiracy theories. Even when thoroughly debunked, they persist because their believers reinforce one another. The belief isn't tethered to evidence. It's tethered to social connection, identity, and the emotional power of being part of the enlightened few. The feedback circuit becomes a fortress, resistant to facts, insulated by collective conviction. In this way, lies live on, transforming social reality and political landscapes alike. The belief feedback circuit reveals something profound about truth itself. It isn't always a fixed point outside us. Sometimes truth is a social construct, emerging from collective agreement. Reality, in its human experience, is partly created by consensus, shaped by the stories we tell and believe. When belief grows strong enough, it exerts real effects on laws, on behavior, on history itself. But this power comes with danger. If truth can be made by belief, then falsehood can masquerade as truth. Reality becomes malleable, vulnerable to manipulation. The circuit can spiral into collective delusion, mass hysteria, or societal breakdown. The consequences aren't abstract, they can be catastrophic. So, what can we do? Awareness is the first step. Understanding the belief feedback circuit allows us to see how easily our perceptions can be shaped, how powerful collective belief is. It calls for vigilance, questioning our assumptions, seeking facts outside our echo chambers, engaging with opposing views without fear. It calls for humility, the recognition that what we accept as true may be fragile, constructed, and subject to challenge. Ultimately, the belief feedback circuit forces us to reconsider what we mean by truth. Is truth only what is objectively measurable, or is truth also what we experience, what we share, what we build together? It may be both. And navigating between these realms is the challenge of our time. When enough people believe, a lie becomes real in effect. It proves that consensus can generate truth, sometimes bending reality itself. But it also warns us, truth is fragile. Guard it well. Question it relentlessly. And remember, the power of belief is as dangerous as it is creative. The disproved proof paradox. You step into a world where truth and falsehood no longer stand on solid ground, but drift like shadows in a fog. This is the heart of the disproved proof paradox. A reality in which exposing a piece of evidence as fabricated does not clarify the truth. Instead, it collapses the very foundation on which all narratives rest. When proof is disproved, the line between fact and fiction does not simply shift. It evaporates, leaving chaos in its wake. Imagine a scandal exposed by damning documents. The public believes they have found the truth, the smoking gun. But then, the documents are shown to be forgeries, the evidence fabricated. What happens? Do we find the real story? Often no. Instead, disbelief spreads. Every other piece of evidence, no matter how carefully vetted, comes under suspicion. The narrative fractures, and multiple versions of events emerge, each claiming to be the truth. The paradox is brutal. Disproving one proof does not reveal another reality. It unmoors all realities. This phenomenon is not theoretical. History offers countless examples where disproved evidence plunged entire societies into doubt. Take, for instance, the forged Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a fabricated document that falsely implicated a group in a vast conspiracy. Attempts to disprove it led to increased polarization rather than consensus. The revelation of forgery did not close the chapter. Instead, it ignited new waves of conspiracy and mistrust. Here, disproving proof did not restore clarity, but deepened the abyss between competing truths. In the digital age, the paradox intensifies. Every claim can be countered by accusations of fabrication. A viral video exposed as staged doesn't end the debate. It sparks counter-accusations that the debunking itself is fake. Social media amplifies these cycles, creating echo chambers where each faction lives in its own reality, armed with competing proofs and disproofs. The paradox becomes a battlefield with no neutral ground to stand on. Philosophically, the disproved proof paradox challenges the foundation of epistemology, the study of knowledge. How do we know what is true when the verification process itself is suspect, when every fact can be contested as fabricated? Knowledge becomes a fragile construct. The paradox forces us to confront the limits of certainty, the instability of truth, and the vulnerability of systems built on trust. In courtrooms, this paradox has real consequences. Evidence is the cornerstone of justice. But when evidence is discredited as forged or manipulated, it does not necessarily lead to truth. Often it leads to a stalemate where guilt and innocence blur. Defense and prosecution create dueling narratives, each claiming legitimacy while dismantling the other's proof. The jury is left not with clarity, but confusion, trapped between competing realities. This paradox also haunts journalism. The exposure of fake news stories sometimes discredits entire news outlets or entire fields of reporting. Audiences, flooded with disproved proofs, begin to question all information sources, eroding the social contract of trust between media and public. When proof is disproved en masse, society's ability to form a shared understanding fractures, threatening democratic discourse itself. The psychological impact is profound. Humans crave certainty, a coherent story to anchor their understanding. The paradox leaves us adrift, fostering cynicism and apathy. If every truth is suspect, why bother seeking facts? This can lead to disengagement or radicalization, as people gravitate toward ideologies offering clear answers amidst uncertainty. Yet, the paradox also challenges us to rethink truth. If disproved proof does not reveal the real story, how do we find it? Perhaps the answer lies not in isolated proofs, but in dialogue, critical thinking, and humility. Recognizing the fragility of proof invites a more nuanced approach, one that values transparency, acknowledges complexity, and resists the allure of absolute certainty. The disproved proof paradox is a mirror reflecting our times. It reveals how easily trust can be shattered and how difficult it is to rebuild. It warns us that in the search for truth, disproving a lie is not enough. We must also build new foundations. Otherwise, we risk descending into a world where narratives clash endlessly, and reality becomes an unstable battleground with no resolution. In this fragile landscape, the greatest challenge is to hold space for uncertainty without surrendering to nihilism, to seek truth with rigor, yet with openness, to understand that disproving proof is not the end of the story, but a moment that demands deeper inquiry and collective wisdom. The paradox does not condemn us to confusion. It calls us to vigilance. It reminds us that truth is not a single proof or disproof, but an ongoing pursuit. And in embracing this pursuit, we reclaim the possibility of clarity amid chaos. As you reflect on the disproved proof paradox, consider your own place in the cycle. How do you discern fact from fiction when the ground beneath both is shaky? How do you respond when every proof you trust is called into question? The answers may not be easy, but they are essential. For in this paradox lies the very struggle to understand our world and ourselves, the circular reference puzzle. Imagine hearing a statement so self-contained that it refers only to itself for proof. This statement is true, it declares, or perhaps this claim is false. At first, these words seem straightforward, simple enough to understand or dismiss. But the moment you try to pin them down, to test their validity or falsehood, you find yourself trapped in a mental loop. The claim doesn't lead outward to evidence or contradiction. Instead, it turns inward, referencing itself again and again, creating a closed circuit of reasoning with no entrance, no exit. This is the essence of the circular reference puzzle, a paradox that binds your mind in a loop where truth and falsehood evaporate, leaving only confusion. Circular references appear in many forms. In logic, they're called self-referential statements. In computer science, they manifest as programs or spreadsheets where one cell's value depends on itself directly or indirectly. In everyday language, they're the tautologies and empty phrases that sound profound but say nothing new. The problem is that circularity breaks the fundamental rule of verification. Claims must be testable by something outside themselves. When a claim refers only to itself, it becomes impossible to validate or falsify because there's no external ground to stand on. Take the classic example. This statement is false. If the statement is true, then what it says must hold. It is false. But if it's false, then it's not true that it's false, which means it must be true. This back and forth traps you in a logical bind known as the liar paradox, a quintessential circular reference that has puzzled philosophers for centuries. No resolution emerges because each attempt to assign truth values flips the result to its opposite. The puzzle is not just a quirky intellectual game. It exposes deep limits in our systems of reasoning and language itself. Beyond philosophy, circular references creep into everyday life. In bureaucracy, policies refer to rules that refer back to the same policies, creating endless loops of responsibility and blame. In arguments, people sometimes use circular logic to defend positions by restating them in different words, creating a closed loop where no genuine progress or understanding is possible. The frustration is palpable. You argue in circles, going nowhere, trapped by the structure of the claim itself. In technology, circular references can cause practical headaches. In spreadsheets, for example, a cell referencing itself can cause errors or infinite recalculations. Programmers must carefully design systems to avoid or detect these loops, lest their programs freeze or crash. The metaphor extends naturally to human thought. Circular reasoning can freeze mental progress, trapping us in confusion or indecision. What makes the circular reference puzzle so compelling and so maddening is how it reveals the fragile foundations of knowledge. We rely on evidence, on logic, on a chain of reasoning that leads us outward toward something firm. But when the chain loops back on itself, that foundation dissolves. We are left spinning inside a bubble of words and meanings with no anchor to reality. The puzzle forces us to confront the limits of language and meaning. Can words ever fully capture truth if they sometimes circle endlessly without touching ground? Yet, paradoxically, circular references can also have power. In some contexts, they create self-sustaining systems, feedback loops in biology, reflexivity in social systems, recursive definitions in mathematics. The key difference is that these loops are embedded in larger frameworks that provide grounding. Without that external context, the loop remains an imprisoning puzzle, a trap for the mind. The circular reference puzzle invites us to be vigilant in our thinking. It warns us against accepting claims at face value, especially when they appear to support themselves without external evidence. It challenges us to seek out the foundations beneath statements, to break loops by stepping outside the cycle of self-reference. And it humbles us by revealing that some questions, some claims, may be inherently unresolvable within the systems we use. Ultimately, the puzzle is a mirror reflecting our desire for certainty and closure. We crave answers, neat packages of truth or falsehood, but some claims defy that neatness, turning us in circles, reminding us that knowledge is sometimes elusive and that language itself can deceive. The circular reference puzzle is not just a logical curiosity. It's a profound lesson in epistemology, humility, and the complex dance between meaning and confusion. So, next time you encounter a claim that points only to itself for proof, recognize the trap. Don't rush to judgment or despair. Instead, pause and seek the wider context. Step outside the loop, because only by breaking the circle can we find our way to clarity and escape the endless confusion the puzzle encloses us in. The simulated witness conundrum. What if every memory you hold dear, every vivid moment, every triumphant success or painful failure is no more than a carefully crafted hallucination? If your mind can be edited, manipulated, or rewritten, how can you trust the stories you tell yourself? The simulated witness conundrum asks this unsettling question and pulls us into a world where reality and illusion blur, where the certainty of memory becomes a fragile, fallible construct. Memory has long been regarded as the keeper of truth, the silent witness to our lives. But science and philosophy have repeatedly shown that memory is not a flawless recording. It is malleable, reconstructive, and vulnerable to suggestion. Now, imagine a future, or a present, where memories can be artificially implanted or erased, where your mind might hold recollections that never actually happened. What then becomes of identity, truth, and trust? In this conundrum, a vivid recollection can be as unreliable as a programmed hallucination. Both feel real, both carry the emotional weight of lived experience, yet both can be fabrications. The brain, wired to fill gaps and create coherent narratives, doesn't question the source. It accepts the input as fact, folding it seamlessly into the tapestry of your consciousness. The line between authentic memory and artificial simulation dissolves. Consider eyewitness testimony, a cornerstone of justice systems worldwide. If memories can be edited or fabricated, how can courts rely on testimony that once seemed so certain? The simulated witness conundrum exposes a fundamental flaw. Even our most confident recollections might be shadows cast by manipulation, whether intentional or accidental. A witness might swear under oath about an event that never occurred, simply because their memory has been altered. This issue is amplified by emerging technologies. Neural implants, virtual reality, and sophisticated algorithms already hint at the possibility of memory editing. Ethical questions explode. Who controls these memories? Can implanted memories be trusted? Can you distinguish your true experiences from those inserted by others? The simulated witness conundrum isn't science fiction anymore. It's a looming reality demanding urgent scrutiny. The psychological toll is profound. If your mind can be programmed to remember a life you never lived, what anchors your sense of self? Identity is tied to memory, our choices, relationships, lessons learned. If the foundation is compromised, what remains of you? The conundrum forces us to ask, Is the self a stable entity, or a fluid narrative constantly rewritten? Moreover, this conundrum challenges how we perceive others. If memory can be fabricated, trust becomes elusive. Relationships rely on shared histories and mutual understanding. If memories are suspect, how can we be sure of our connections? The simulated witness conundrum threatens not only personal certainty but social cohesion. Philosophers have long wrestled with the reliability of perception and memory, but the simulated witness conundrum adds a chilling twist. It's no longer just about faulty recall or bias. It's about deliberate technological intervention that reshapes reality at the neural level. The boundaries between genuine experience and artificial construct are breached. Yet, there is a paradoxical hope embedded here. If memories can be manipulated, perhaps they can also be healed. Traumatic memories might be softened, false narratives corrected, identities rebuilt. The simulated witness conundrum is a double-edged sword, wielding both peril and promise. In the end, the conundrum urges caution and humility. It warns us not to trust memory blindly, no matter how vivid or emotional. It reminds us that truth is elusive, shaped not just by what happened, but by how it is remembered, or programmed to be remembered. And it compels us to question the nature of reality itself, as perceived through the fragile lens of the mind. When your memory can be edited, the vivid recollection you hold as fact might be nothing more than a simulation, a programmed hallucination that feels true, yet remains unmoored from reality. The simulated witness conundrum leaves us with an urgent question. If you cannot trust your own mind, who or what can you trust? The contradictory consensus trap. Imagine a group of people coming together to agree on a truth. Yet, beneath the surface of this agreement lies a secret. They all know the truth is something else entirely. This is the essence of the contradictory consensus trap. When a collective agrees on something false, knowingly, the resulting shared belief becomes more powerful than any objective evidence. In this strange social alchemy, dishonesty breeds a reality that defies facts, shaping behaviors, institutions, and even entire cultures. This paradox reveals one of humanity's most unsettling vulnerabilities: the power of collective belief to override empirical truth. When a group agrees to uphold a falsehood, it creates a social reality, a shared fiction that can dictate actions, enforce norms, and suppress dissent. It's a trap because, while every individual may be aware of the lie, the pressure to conform and maintain cohesion silences truth, and the false consensus becomes the new reality. To understand this deeply, consider historical examples where societies maintained widely accepted beliefs that contradicted observable facts. For centuries, entire civilizations believed the Earth was flat, not because empirical observation was impossible, but because social, religious, and political institutions enforced this consensus. Despite contrary evidence by sailors and scholars, the consensus held. The social pressure to conform was so immense that challenging it was dangerous, and the collective lie shaped exploration, education, and worldview. Another vivid example is the concept of groupthink, a psychological phenomenon where the desire for harmony in a decision-making group leads to irrational or dysfunctional outcomes. Members suppress dissenting opinions even when they recognize flaws in the consensus. This collective self-deception often results in catastrophic decisions, like the Bay of Pigs invasion or the Challenger space shuttle disaster. Here, the contradictory consensus trap operates by prioritizing unity over truth, allowing falsehoods to masquerade as unquestioned facts. In the political sphere, this trap manifests in propaganda and misinformation campaigns. When governments or powerful groups push narratives they know are false, they exploit the human tendency to accept social consensus. Repetition of lies, combined with suppression of opposing views, makes the false narrative real in the minds of the public. Over time, this constructed reality influences voting patterns, social behavior, and policymaking. Objective evidence, no matter how overwhelming, struggles to penetrate the fortress of collective belief. The contradictory consensus trap also appears in everyday social dynamics. Imagine a workplace where employees all agree to hide a failing project's true status from leadership. Each individual knows the truth, but to protect jobs or maintain appearances, they perpetuate a consensus of success. This manufactured reality affects decisions, budgets, and morale, often worsening the situation. Here, Collective dishonesty grows stronger than facts, influencing outcomes in dangerous ways. Psychologically, this trap exploits cognitive biases like conformity bias and social proof. Humans are wired to follow group norms, often valuing belonging over accuracy. When everyone around you accepts a falsehood, resisting becomes not only difficult but socially risky. This dynamic enables false consensuses to endure even in the face of contrary evidence. Philosophically, the trap challenges notions of objective reality itself. If enough people agree on a falsehood, does it become real? In social constructionism, many aspects of reality, money, laws, cultural norms, exist because of collective belief rather than inherent objective existence. The contradictory consensus trap highlights the fragility and malleability of what we call truth, showing it can be shaped by collective agreement regardless of empirical validity. This paradox also has profound implications in the digital age. Social media platforms amplify echo chambers, where groups reinforce shared falsehoods through selective exposure and algorithmic filtering. Viral misinformation gains traction not because it is true, but because it resonates with a group's beliefs and is repeated incessantly. The trap becomes a feedback loop. False consensus breeds more belief, drowning out facts and critical thinking. Breaking free from the contradictory consensus trap requires courage, critical thinking, and social resilience. Whistleblowers, independent media, and scientific inquiry act as vital counterforces, challenging collective falsehoods. Yet these efforts often face hostility, isolation, and skepticism, reflecting the trap's power to maintain itself. In conclusion, the contradictory consensus trap is a potent social phenomenon where collective dishonesty crafts realities stronger than facts. It warns us to question consensus, seek evidence, and value truth over comfort. In a world awash with information and competing narratives, understanding this trap is essential to preserving intellectual freedom and authentic knowledge. When you see a group confidently asserting something despite evidence to the contrary, remember, consensus alone does not guarantee truth. Sometimes, it signals a deeper paradox, a collective dance with contradiction, shaping a reality that exists not in fact, but in shared belief. The assertion-exhaustion cycle. Have you ever noticed how a statement, no matter how strange or untrue at first, begins to feel true simply by hearing it again and again? This is the silent, insidious force known as the assertion-exhaustion cycle. It's a psychological loop where repetition alone warps our perception of reality, transforming unverified claims into something our brains accept as fact. The power of repetition does not just inform us, it exhausts our mental defenses until skepticism fades, replaced by a weary acceptance. Imagine you encounter a new piece of information, an idea, a rumor, a claim. Your brain instinctively asks questions. Is this true? What's the evidence? Who said it? But if you hear this claim repeated often enough, on the news, in conversations, on social media, your brain's questioning begins to dull. The sheer frequency creates a kind of mental fatigue. You don't even need proof anymore, because familiarity itself becomes a shortcut to truth. This phenomenon is called the illusory truth effect in psychology. The more you hear a statement, the more believable it becomes, regardless of its actual accuracy. Your brain equates familiarity with safety and truth, because evolutionarily, recognizing patterns and repeating trusted information helped our ancestors survive. But in the modern world, this shortcut can be exploited, creating a cycle of assertion-exhaustion that clouds judgment. Let's break down the cycle. First, an unverified claim is introduced, sometimes intentionally, sometimes accidentally. It might be a political slogan, a misleading statistic, or a wild conspiracy theory. Then it is repeated, on TV, online, in everyday talk. Each repetition chips away at your internal skepticism. The claim becomes less foreign, less jarring. Your brain's warning bells grow quieter. Eventually, this constant exposure causes mental exhaustion. Your critical faculties tire from the relentless repetition. Instead of actively analyzing each iteration, your brain conserves energy by accepting the statement as true enough. It's not necessarily that you consciously believe it. Often it just feels true, like a song stuck in your head, familiar and comforting. This cycle fuels misinformation epidemics. Consider how false claims spread faster and linger longer than facts online. The repetition across platforms, amplified by algorithms, ensures the claim saturates your environment. Before long, even the most skeptical minds find themselves hesitating, questioning what was once obviously false. The assertion-exhaustion cycle also explains why people cling to beliefs even when faced with contradictory evidence. Once repetition has conditioned the brain to accept a claim, it resists change. The effort required to unlearn a familiar idea is enormous. The exhaustion isn't just cognitive, it's emotional. Challenging long-held beliefs threatens identity, social belonging, and worldview, all of which add weight to the cycle. But this cycle isn't invincible. Awareness is a powerful antidote. Recognizing that repetition alone can create false familiarity allows you to pause, to question the origins of your beliefs. Ask yourself, have I critically examined this claim? Do I know where it came from? What evidence supports it? Or am I accepting it simply because I've heard it too many times? Media literacy and fact-checking play crucial roles here. In a world flooded with information, being able to verify claims independently breaks the cycle. Slowing down, seeking diverse sources, and embracing uncertainty guard against assertion exhaustion. Mental rest and reflection help replenish your critical faculties, making you less vulnerable to repetition's deceptive pull. There's also a societal dimension. When leaders, influencers, or media outlets repeat unverified claims, they don't just inform, they condition public belief. Their repetition carries authority, accelerating the exhaustion cycle on a massive scale. This amplifies the responsibility of those who shape public discourse to avoid careless repetition of falsehoods. At a deeper level, the assertion-exhaustion cycle reveals how fragile our grasp on truth can be. It's a warning that truth isn't guaranteed by the loudness or frequency of a claim, but by its tested accuracy and openness to scrutiny. In a culture of endless noise, silence, and skepticism, become radical acts of resistance. So next time you hear a claim repeated incessantly, resist the temptation to accept it at face value. Take a breath, step back, challenge your mental fatigue. Remember that your brain's acceptance isn't proof. It's a sign that the cycle is at work. True understanding requires effort beyond familiarity. It demands curiosity, doubt, and courage. Because in the end, repetition can build belief, but only truth can build trust. The fractal confession paradox. Imagine a confession, not a simple admission of guilt, but a carefully constructed labyrinth where every layer undermines the one before it. This is the fractal confession paradox. A truth folded inside a lie, nested inside a partial truth, spiraling infinitely. Each revelation seems to clarify, but instead multiplies doubt. You try to hold the confession steady, but it fractures beneath your grasp, slipping away into ambiguity. At first glance, confessions promise clarity. They are meant to cut through mystery and reveal what happened. But when structured fractally, a confession becomes a maze of contradictions. One statement undoes another. Details shift like fractal patterns, self-similar, but never quite the same. What looks like honesty is layered with evasion, distortion, or misdirection. The confession doesn't lead out of the fog, it pulls you deeper into it. Consider the classic unreliable narrator. Their confession is not a simple truth, but a spiral of memories and motivations, each layer reframing the last. Like in Gone Girl, where Amy's confession reveals only partial truths, half story, half deception, forcing the audience to question everything they thought they knew. The fractal structure of her narrative turns the confession into an elaborate game, where every truth contains a hidden lie, and every lie reflects a deeper truth. This paradox also appears in real-world interrogations. A suspect might confess to certain facts while denying others, changing details under pressure, or introducing new versions to confuse investigators. Each fragment seems like progress, but when pieced together, the confession forms a fractal pattern of partial admissions and denials. Law enforcement faces the challenge of parsing meaning from this endless loop, where truth and deception coexist at every scale. Philosophically, the fractal confession paradox challenges our notions of coherence and authenticity. Truth is often seen as linear, a clear narrative moving from ignorance to knowledge. But fractal confessions shatter this model. They force us to see truth as multidimensional and recursive, where understanding requires embracing complexity and contradiction rather than rejecting them. The confession becomes a reflection of the fractured self, where memory, guilt, fear, and self-preservation intertwine endlessly. This fractal nature means that the more you analyze a confession, the more ambiguity you uncover. Each layer disproves or complicates the one beneath it, creating an infinite regress. You may grasp a fragment of honesty, only to find it undermined by a subsequent claim. The confession is like a kaleidoscope. Each turn reveals a new pattern, no two the same, and none final. It resists closure, defies resolution. In literature and film, this paradox heightens tension and uncertainty. Confessions become puzzles, not solutions. They invite audiences into the detective's dilemma: how to discern truth amid layered contradictions, how to hold on to meaning when every answer spawns more questions. The fractal confession transforms narrative into experience, reflecting the messy reality of human psychology. On a psychological level, fractal confessions reveal how guilt and trauma disrupt memory and self-perception. The confessor's mind may genuinely struggle to separate fact from fiction, constructing a narrative that folds back on itself. Partial truths may be sincere, even as they coexist with lies told to protect or manipulate. The fractal confession is not always deceitful. It can be a cry for help, a fragmented plea for understanding. The paradox also exposes the limitations of language. Words fail to capture the whole truth, so confessions become approximations, patchworks of experience and intention. Each statement is both revealing and concealing, a fractal tile in a mosaic that cannot be fully completed. The more the confessor tries to clarify, the more they reveal the complexity of their own contradictions. In law, ethics, and society, the fractal confession challenges how we assign blame and understand responsibility. If every confession contains partial truths and lies, how do we judge? How do we find justice amid ambiguity? The paradox demands humility, reminding us that human experience resists neat categorization. It warns against simplistic readings and urges careful, nuanced consideration. Ultimately, the fractal confession paradox teaches us about the nature of truth itself. Truth is not always a solid, singular entity, but can be layered, recursive, fractal, reflecting the complexity of the human condition. In every confession lies a universe of ambiguity, a spiral that both reveals and obscures. To navigate this paradox is to accept that understanding often comes not from certainty, but from embracing the intricate dance of light and shadow. As you listen to a confession, remember, every word may hold multiple meanings, every pause may signal a hidden depth. The fractal confession is not a failure of truth, but a testament to its complexity, a mirror reflecting the tangled reality of who we are. And in this fractal mirror, every glance reveals something new, something unresolved, something deeply human, the implausible honesty tactic. Imagine hearing a confession so bizarre, so unexpected, that your first instinct is to dismiss it as a lie. It feels too strange to be true, too outlandish to be real. Yet, it comes with a sincerity that unsettles you. This is the implausible honesty tactic, a psychological twist where the truth is so wildly improbable that it is mistaken for deception. The paradox here is profound. Sometimes reality itself feels like a lie simply because it defies what we expect, what we consider believable. Our minds, trained to filter for the probable, reject the improbable truth as falsehood, turning honesty into a mask for mistrust. This phenomenon plays out across stories, relationships, and even history. Think of whistleblowers who reveal shocking truths that sound like conspiracy theories. At first, their words are met with skepticism, ridicule, or outright denial, not because the truth is absent, but because it stretches the bounds of what we think is possible. Their honesty becomes a weapon and a curse, forcing us to question not just their words, but the limits of our own credulity. We struggle because accepting the truth demands rewriting our mental maps, unsettling the comforting narratives we've built. The implausible honesty tactic taps into a fundamental tension in human cognition. Our brains rely on patterns and expectations to make sense of the world. When information arrives that conflicts violently with these patterns, the default response is disbelief. The mind prefers a familiar lie over a strange truth. This is why magicians, storytellers, and even skilled deceivers know how to use plausibility to their advantage. But when someone breaks the mold and offers a truth that's implausible, they become victims of their own honesty. Their sincerity is overshadowed by the disbelief their claims provoke. Consider personal anecdotes where friends confess embarrassing or extraordinary experiences. The listener's reaction often slides between astonishment and doubt, caught in the liminal space where truth and fiction blur. "Are you serious?" we ask, unsure whether to believe or laugh. The implausible honesty tactic reveals how social trust is not just about truthfulness, but about the fit between reality and expectation. Honesty that defies expectation becomes a psychological puzzle, one that the brain resists solving. This tension has profound consequences. In the legal system, eyewitness testimonies may be discounted if they seem too unbelievable, even if accurate. In journalism, stories that challenge prevailing narratives are scrutinized harder, sometimes dismissed as fabrications. The implausible honesty tactic exposes a deep vulnerability in how societies discern truth. It reminds us that credibility is fragile, and that truth, when counterintuitive, can be weaponized against those who dare to speak it. Yet, there is power in embracing the implausible truth. When we confront realities that unsettle us, we expand our understanding of the world. The discomfort of disbelief is the gateway to growth, forcing us to reassess assumptions, broaden horizons, and become more open-minded. History is filled with examples where what once seemed impossible became accepted fact. The Earth orbiting the Sun, germs causing disease, the vastness of the cosmos. Each breakthrough faced the implausible honesty tactic before entering the realm of accepted knowledge. In intimate relationships, the tactic reveals itself in moments of vulnerability. When someone shares a truth so personal or strange that it shocks, the listener must choose between skepticism and empathy. The challenge is to hold space for the implausible, to allow truth to be heard without immediate judgment. This openness strengthens bonds and deepens trust, even if the truth is hard to swallow. But the implausible honesty tactic also warns us to be cautious. Not every strange claim is true. Sometimes deception is crafted precisely to exploit our tendency to reject plausibility. Distinguishing between genuine implausibility and deliberate falsehood requires critical thinking, evidence, and an awareness of our own biases. Ultimately, the implausible honesty tactic is a mirror reflecting the fragility of belief itself. It reveals how much our grasp of reality depends on expectations, and how easily those expectations can blind us to truth. It challenges us to question not only others but ourselves. How willing are we to accept what defies belief? How open are we to the discomfort that true honesty sometimes brings? The next time you encounter a truth that seems too strange to be real, pause. Remember the implausible honesty tactic. Understand that reality can wear the guise of deception when it defies expectation. The task is not to reject what surprises us, but to lean into that surprise, to hold space for mystery, and to allow truth its wild, untamed existence, no matter how implausible it may seem. The reverse inference fallacy. The reverse inference fallacy is a trap of perception, a cruel cognitive shortcut where appearances overwrite reality. If liars look nervous and you look nervous, observers will infer you're lying too, no matter the truth. It's a psychological sleight of hand that proves how fragile the boundary between what is real and what seems real can be. In this fallacy, the outer appearance becomes the final arbiter of trust, eclipsing facts, evidence, and even sincerity. Imagine a courtroom. A witness trembles, avoids eye contact, fidgets. The jury's eyes are drawn to these signals, interpreting them as guilt. But nervousness isn't exclusive to liars. It's the human response to stress, fear, uncertainty. A truthful person under pressure can look as deceptive as a practiced liar. The reverse inference fallacy tells us that, in the social theater of judgment, the appearance of guilt can be as damning as guilt itself. This fallacy extends beyond courtrooms. In everyday life, people make snap judgments based on facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, cues that are often ambiguous or misleading. If someone's hands shake, their voice quivers, or they avert their gaze, we instinctively question their honesty. But these are signs of emotion, not proof of deceit. When nervousness is contagious, as when someone else's anxiety causes you to appear anxious, the fallacy multiplies. Observers see two nervous people and assume both are hiding something. The cognitive mechanism behind this is our brain's reliance on heuristics, mental shortcuts that simplify complex social interactions. We cannot analyze every word or fact in detail, so we use appearance as a proxy for truth. But heuristics are fallible. The reverse inference fallacy is a glaring example of this imperfection, where correlation is mistaken for causation. Nervousness correlates with lying, but does not cause it. This fallacy can have devastating consequences. Innocent people can be disbelieved, relationships fractured, reputations tarnished, all because the social narrative favors appearance over reality. Victims of this fallacy may find themselves trapped, unable to convince others of their truth, their genuine nervousness mistaken for cunning deception. The fallacy weaponizes human bias, turning a natural emotional response into a mark of untrustworthiness. In interrogation rooms, this fallacy shapes tactics. Police officers watch for signs of nervousness, interpreting them as signs of guilt. But innocent suspects often show more anxiety, amplifying false suspicions. The reverse inference fallacy thus becomes a feedback loop, where nervousness breeds suspicion, which breeds more nervousness, distorting the search for truth. Social media and public opinion magnify the effect. In viral videos, moments of visible nervousness are dissected and used as evidence of lies, often stripped of context. The crowd's judgment is swift and ruthless, driven by appearance rather than facts. The fallacy turns public discourse into a minefield where truth struggles to surface beneath layers of perception. The reverse inference fallacy also teaches a profound lesson about human empathy and the limits of perception. We tend to conflate emotional expression with moral character, but this conflation blinds us to complexity. Nervousness is a universal human experience, not a moral failing. Recognizing the fallacy requires humility, an awareness that our judgments are imperfect, our perceptions fallible. At a deeper level, this fallacy reveals the fragility of trust. Trust is fragile because it is built not only on facts, but on feelings, perceptions, and intuitions. When appearance misleads, trust crumbles. The fallacy reminds us how easily social bonds can fracture under the weight of misinterpretation, and how vital it is to question first impressions. In interpersonal relationships, the fallacy complicates communication. When one partner is anxious, the other might misread that as dishonesty or withdrawal. This misunderstanding can create conflict, reinforcing the cycle of nervousness and mistrust. Awareness of the reverse inference fallacy offers a path to patience and compassion, urging us to look beyond surface signs to the deeper reality beneath. Ultimately, the reverse inference fallacy is a cautionary tale about the limits of human judgment. It warns us against the seductive power of appearances and urges us to seek deeper understanding. Nervousness, hesitation, fear, these are part of being human, not proof of deceit. In a world quick to judge by looks, the fallacy reminds us that reality is often more nuanced than it seems. If liars look nervous, and you look nervous, people will infer you're lying. But that inference is a fallacy, a trick of perception, where appearance erases the boundary between truth and falsehood. Recognizing this fallacy is a step toward justice, empathy, and a more honest understanding of the human condition. The preemptive denial gambit. Denying something before any accusation arises is a curious social maneuver. On the surface, it seems like a confident assertion of innocence, a preemptive shield against potential doubt. Yet, paradoxically, this very act often sparks suspicion rather than quelling it. When someone rushes to deny a claim before it's even made, observers tend to interpret the denial not as reassurance, but as a concealed admission, a sign that something indeed warrants hiding. This phenomenon, known as the preemptive denial gambit, exposes a subtle but powerful dynamic in human communication, trust, and deception. At its core, the preemptive denial gambit is about timing and intent. Denial is a natural response to accusation, a defense mechanism triggered to preserve reputation or innocence. However, denying preemptively before any suspicion is voiced transforms the denial itself into a statement loaded with meaning. It raises the question, why deny something that hasn't even been questioned? This question primes the mind to search for hidden truths, to infer that the denial masks something more. Consider a simple example. Imagine a colleague who, upon entering a meeting, blurts out, "I'm not involved in the budget cuts," before anyone mentions the topic. Even if they are innocent, their unsolicited denial raises eyebrows. Why would they bring it up unprompted unless they feared implication? The group's collective perception shifts. Instead of reassurance, the denial plants a seed of doubt, subtly reshaping the narrative. This dynamic is rooted in the psychology of suspicion and the heuristics humans use to interpret communication. People rely on context, timing, and relevance to gauge truthfulness. When information is volunteered without prompt, especially denials, it violates conversational norms and signals potential concealment. Listeners automatically infer that the speaker is responding to an unspoken accusation or guilt lurking beneath the surface. Politically, the preemptive denial gambit is a familiar tool. Public figures often issue statements denying wrongdoing before scandals break. While intended to control the narrative and prevent damage, these early denials sometimes backfire, fueling speculation and media frenzy. The very act of preemptive denial becomes a headline, interpreted as an implicit admission that something is amiss. The court of public opinion often weighs this maneuver heavier than the eventual facts. In personal relationships, this gambit manifests in subtle but equally telling ways. Imagine a partner saying, "I never texted that person," before any mention of suspicion arises. Such a statement, though denying innocence, paradoxically invites questions and mistrust. The partner's anxiety, displayed through premature denial, undermines their credibility. It illustrates how preemptive denial can corrode trust even in intimate contexts. The preemptive denial gambit also plays a significant role in legal settings. Defense attorneys may advise clients to refrain from making spontaneous denials before formal questioning. Early denials can be twisted, taken out of context, or used to suggest consciousness of guilt. The legal maxim, "silence is golden," partially arises from understanding that denying too soon may do more harm than good. This phenomenon is closely tied to the principle of pragmatics in linguistics, the study of language use beyond literal meaning. When someone preemptively denies something, the pragmatic implication suggests awareness of a hidden accusation. This enriches the message with subtext that colors listener interpretation, often negatively. Social media amplifies this gambit's effects. Celebrities and influencers rush to issue statements, denying rumors before they spread, hoping to nip controversy in the bud. Yet, the very speed and preemptiveness of these denials can spark viral speculation. The public's hunger for scandal interprets early denials as confirmation of underlying issues, feeding cycles of rumor and distrust. At a deeper level, the preemptive denial gambit reflects our collective discomfort with uncertainty. Humans crave clarity and certainty in social interactions. When a denial comes too soon, it destabilizes that desire, prompting minds to fill the gap with imagined transgressions. The gambit weaponizes this discomfort, intentionally or not, shaping perceptions through strategic silence or speech. Philosophically, this gambit highlights the complexity of truth as a social construct. Truth is not only about facts, but about timing, narrative control, and perception management. The preemptive denial disrupts straightforward communication, turning statements into performative acts that influence belief independently of their factual content. To navigate this gambit, both speakers and listeners must cultivate awareness. Speakers should recognize that preemptive denials can backfire, and sometimes silence or measured response better serves honesty. Listeners must guard against jumping to conclusions, balancing skepticism with openness, and seeking context beyond initial reactions. In conclusion, the preemptive denial gambit reveals a paradox in human communication. The attempt to assert innocence before suspicion arises often breeds suspicion itself. This dynamic underscores the delicate dance between speech and silence, truth and perception, trust and doubt. It teaches us that in the social world, what is said is inseparable from when and how it is said, and that the timing of denial can turn defense into inadvertent confession. Next time you hear a denial spoken before any accusation, pause and consider why it came so early. Is it a confident assertion or a shadow cast by fear? In that moment, you glimpse the intricate interplay of honesty and suspicion that defines human interaction, and the power of silence as much as speech in shaping reality. The sincerity projection error. We all like to believe that others see the world as we do, that when we speak honestly, others will also speak honestly, that when we deceive, others deceive as well. This assumption, that other people's sincerity or dishonesty mirrors our own, is the heart of the sincerity projection error. It's a subtle, devastating cognitive trap that warps how we judge truth and falsehood, leading us to misread lies as truths and truths as manipulation. Imagine a moment when someone tells you something. Your mind races to decide, are they being honest or are they hiding something? But here's the catch. Your answer often depends less on the other person's words or actions, and more on your own inner compass. If you value honesty, if you habitually speak truth, you tend to believe others are similarly sincere. Your brain projects your own honesty outward, coloring your interpretation of others. But what if you don't? What if your nature leans toward deceit, or you're accustomed to guarding secrets? Then you project suspicion, assuming others manipulate or lie just as you might. This projection doesn't arise from evidence. It arises from self-perception. You wear your own mask so deeply that you mistake it for everyone else's. This error leads to devastating misunderstandings. If you are honest and assume honesty in others, you might accept falsehoods without question, because your default expectation is sincerity. Lies become truths, and deception slips past your defenses unnoticed. Trust, built on your sincere foundation, becomes a liability. Conversely, if you are suspicious or dishonest yourself, you might see manipulation everywhere. Even genuine kindness can seem calculated. Sincere apologies may feel like traps. And honest communication might be read as strategic maneuvering. You isolate yourself behind walls of doubt, mistrusting the very truths that could liberate you. The sincerity projection error fuels cycles of betrayal and alienation. Partners misread each other's intentions. Friends doubt motives. Colleagues suspect loyalty. When both sides project their own honesty or dishonesty, communication fractures. Each misunderstands the other, trapped in a maze of assumptions rather than clear truth. Psychological research reveals this bias is powerful because it's subconscious. We don't choose to assume others mirror our honesty. We simply do. It's an automatic mental shortcut, a way to predict behavior in a complex social world. But this shortcut comes at the cost of accuracy. Consider politics and social groups. Partisans often assume their opponents are either naively honest or cynically deceptive, reflecting their own stance. This fuels polarization, as each side misreads the other's intentions. The error deepens divisions, making compromise seem impossible. Even in everyday life, the consequences are profound. Someone who has experienced deception may find it impossible to trust, projecting their own guardedness onto everyone. Another who has rarely lied may be blindsided by manipulation because their default belief is in others' truthfulness. Breaking free from this error requires self-awareness. To understand others, you must first understand yourself, your own relationship to honesty and deceit. Are you naturally trusting? Are you guarded or guardedly honest? Recognizing your internal bias allows you to question your assumptions about others. Empathy becomes essential. Instead of projecting your own honesty or dishonesty, strive to see the other person as they are, complex, flawed, and not a mirror image of yourself. Listen deeply. Watch for evidence beyond words, and resist the urge to fill gaps with your own reflections. This error also warns against overconfidence in our judgments. Just because you are honest doesn't guarantee others are. Just because you distrust doesn't mean everyone deceives. Truth and lies are not a simple mirror game. They are tangled, layered, and often hidden beneath appearances. The sincerity projection error challenges our basic assumptions about human connection. It reminds us that honesty isn't universal. It is fragile, contingent, and easily misread. The greatest barriers to understanding others are often our own projections, our inner shadows cast outward, blinding us to reality. So, next time you question someone's truthfulness or doubt their motives, pause. Reflect on your own honesty, your own fears, your own assumptions. Ask yourself, am I seeing this person clearly? Or am I trapped in the mirror of my own sincerity, or its absence? Only by stepping beyond our projections can we truly hear others, trust wisely, and navigate the fragile dance of human truth and deception. The disowned memory loop. You enter the shadowed corridors of your own mind, where memories flicker like fragile ghosts, some vivid and clear, others darkened, distorted, or erased altogether. This is the realm of the disowned memory loop, a haunting paradox where the mind represses painful memories so deeply that even the self loses certainty about what truly happened. The memories you wish weren't real vanish into a fog so thick that reality and forgetfulness entwine, leaving you trapped in a looping dance of denial and doubt. At its core, the disowned memory loop reveals the mind's desperate attempt to protect itself. When faced with trauma, shame, or unbearable grief, the psyche can hide away memories, pushing them beneath layers of consciousness like dangerous secrets locked in a vault. This repression is not a simple forgetting. It is an active process, a denial so powerful that the memory slips beyond reach, turning into a shadow neither fully remembered nor completely erased. Psychologists have long studied this phenomenon. Survivors of trauma sometimes experience dissociative amnesia, where memories of abuse or disaster are inaccessible, yet still influence behavior and emotion. The paradox is that these memories shape identity while remaining absent from conscious awareness. The mind loops endlessly between what happened and what it refuses to admit, creating confusion, anxiety, and a persistent sense of something lost but ungraspable. The loop feeds on uncertainty. You may recall fragments, fleeting images, emotions without context, dreams that feel like memories but could be fantasies. You question your own mind. Did this happen, or am I inventing? Were those feelings real, or the echoes of a story I told myself? The boundary between truth and fiction dissolves. The mind's repression becomes a labyrinth, with each turn opening new passages of doubt. In literature and film, this paradox intensifies drama and psychological tension. Think of movies like Memento or Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where memory itself is unreliable, fractured, and elusive. Characters struggle not just to remember, but to know what is real, what was real, and what they desperately want to forget. The disowned memory loop becomes a metaphor for the human condition, a reflection of how trauma, guilt, and loss distort our understanding of ourselves. This loop also poses profound philosophical questions. If memory shapes identity, what happens when memories are lost or disowned? Are we still the same person? How do we reconcile the self built on forgotten pain or repressed truths? The paradox suggests that our sense of reality is fragile, constructed from incomplete and sometimes contradictory pieces. Memory is not a perfect record, but a story rewritten by emotion and defense. The psychological consequences are immense. Those caught in the loop may experience feelings of alienation, as if part of themselves is missing. They may struggle with anxiety, depression, or identity crises, unable to trust their own recollections. The loop can isolate, making it difficult to form coherent narratives about one's life. Even when memories resurface, they may come fragmented, distorted, or overwhelming, challenging the person's sense of stability. Therapy often seeks to unravel this loop gently, helping individuals face repressed memories in safe, controlled ways. But the paradox remains. Revealing the memory does not always provide clarity or closure. Sometimes it deepens confusion, blurring the lines between past and present, reality and imagination. The process is delicate, as the mind resists reopening wounds it once sealed. The disowned memory loop is a testament to the complexity of human consciousness, a reminder that forgetting is not always escape, and remembering is not always liberation. It challenges the comforting notion that memory is reliable or that truth is accessible. Instead, it presents a landscape where pain can vanish and return, where self-knowledge is perpetually deferred, and where the past is a living, shifting presence. As you consider this paradox, ask yourself, what memories do you disown? Which truths have you hidden so deeply that even you doubt them? The loop invites us to acknowledge the shadows within our minds, not to fear them, but to understand that our memories, lost or remembered, are part of the tapestry that makes us who we are. And in that understanding lies the possibility of healing, even if the path is winding and uncertain. The disowned memory loop does not offer easy answers, but it reveals a profound truth about the human experience. That memory is not a fixed point, but a fractal journey, endless, recursive, and full of mystery. To live fully, we must learn to navigate this loop, embracing both the darkness of forgotten pain and the light of rediscovered self. The manufactured dissonance effect. Imagine standing at a crossroads, faced with two pieces of information that directly contradict each other. One narrative feels familiar, comforting, aligns with your beliefs and emotions. The other challenges everything you hold true, unsettling your worldview. Which do you choose? The manufactured dissonance effect reveals that when confronted with contradictory evidence, the human mind often clings to the narrative that soothes anxiety and preserves identity, regardless of whether it is accurate or true. This is not mere stubbornness, it's a survival mechanism, woven deep into the fabric of cognition. Cognitive dissonance, the discomfort experienced when holding conflicting ideas, is one of psychology's most powerful forces. But the manufactured dissonance effect goes a step further. It describes how minds sometimes manufacture or amplify dissonance, selectively filtering evidence to maintain internal coherence and emotional equilibrium. When faced with a painful truth, your brain doesn't passively receive information. It actively reshapes perception, emphasizing supportive facts, minimizing contradictions, and sometimes denying reality outright. Consider everyday examples. A person deeply invested in a political ideology encounters clear evidence that their chosen leader has lied or acted unethically. Rather than revise their belief, they may dismiss the evidence as fake news, conspiracies, or media bias. The contradictory facts exist, but their mind manufactures dissonance by constructing alternative explanations that preserve a comfortable narrative. The psychological cost of admitting error or shifting belief is often too high, threatening identity, social belonging, and emotional stability. This effect is not limited to politics. In relationships, a partner may overlook clear signs of betrayal because accepting them would shatter their sense of security. In health, individuals may reject scientific findings that conflict with their habits or fears, choosing instead anecdotes or misinformation that align with their preferences. In every domain, manufactured dissonance acts as a filter, shaping perception to fit what the mind can bear rather than what is objectively true. The consequences are profound. On a personal level, it can lead to denial, poor decisions, and fractured relationships. On a societal scale, it fuels polarization, misinformation, and the breakdown of shared reality. When large groups cling to comforting falsehoods, the collective ability to address real problems is compromised. The manufactured dissonance effect traps communities in echo chambers where evidence is curated to confirm pre-existing views, creating parallel realities that rarely intersect. Neuroscience sheds light on this phenomenon. The brain's reward systems are activated by consistency and predictability. Confirming beliefs releases dopamine, providing emotional relief and satisfaction. Contradictory information triggers stress responses, prompting avoidance or rationalization. This biological wiring favors narratives that protect self-esteem and reduce anxiety, even at the cost of truth. The mind becomes an architect of comfort, building castles of selective reasoning and cognitive walls against the discomfort of ambiguity. Yet, this effect is not inherently malevolent. It is an adaptive mechanism designed to preserve psychological coherence in a chaotic world. Without it, humans would be paralyzed by doubt and indecision, constantly shaken by conflicting information. The challenge lies in balancing this natural tendency with intellectual humility and critical thinking, to recognize when comfort blinds us, and to cultivate the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Awareness of the manufactured dissonance effect is the first step toward mitigating its influence. Practices such as seeking diverse perspectives, engaging in reflective thinking, and valuing evidence over emotion can help pierce the veil of comforting narratives. Cultivating environments where doubt and questioning are safe encourages growth beyond the narrow confines of selective belief. The effect also invites compassion. Understanding that others' attachment to comforting narratives often stems from deep psychological needs can foster patience and dialogue instead of judgment and conflict. Recognizing our own vulnerabilities to manufactured dissonance reminds us that no one is immune from the pull of comfort over truth. In the end, the manufactured dissonance effect is a mirror reflecting our human frailty and resilience. It shows how the mind protects itself by sometimes trading accuracy for comfort, stability for complexity. It challenges us to confront this trade-off with honesty, to strive for clarity without sacrificing our need for psychological safety. Because true wisdom lies not in clinging blindly to the narratives that soothe us, but in embracing the tension between what we want to believe and what we must accept. So the next time you encounter evidence that unsettles your worldview, pause. Notice the whisper of dissonance your mind may try to quiet. Ask yourself, am I holding on to comfort at the expense of truth? Can I sit with the discomfort long enough to see what lies beyond? The manufactured dissonance effect reminds us that reality is often uncomfortable, but it is only by stepping into that discomfort that we move toward understanding, growth, and genuine insight. The implanted certainty illusion. Confidence is a powerful illusion. It colors every word, every gesture, every glance with the aura of truth, even when what's being said is pure deception. The implanted certainty illusion reveals a terrifying reality. Confidence can be trained, manufactured, and wielded as a weapon to declare lies with absolute conviction, making falsehoods indistinguishable from genuine belief. In this illusion, certainty is divorced from truth, and the line between fact and fiction blurs into a seamless performance. When someone speaks with unwavering confidence, our brains are hardwired to listen. Confidence triggers a cascade of cognitive biases that shape how we perceive information. The halo effect grants the confident speaker credibility. The anchoring bias makes their statements the starting point for our own judgments. The implanted certainty illusion hijacks these mental shortcuts, exploiting our instinctual trust in conviction. The mechanics behind this illusion are both subtle and profound. Through practice, repetition, and psychological techniques, a person can learn to project confidence even when they harbor deep doubt or know they are lying. The voice steadies, the gaze hardens, the body language aligns. Every nuance, micro-expressions, posture, tone conspires to convince observers that what is being said is true. This performance is so convincing that even the speaker may begin to internalize the lie, blurring the boundary between deception and belief. Political orators, con artists, salespeople, and propagandists have long understood the power of this illusion. They use rehearsed certainty to shape narratives, manipulate public opinion, and rewrite realities. The implanted certainty illusion becomes a tool of influence and control, shaping not just what people think, but what they feel certain is true. When a lie is delivered with confidence, skepticism falters. Doubt becomes social discomfort, and questioning is suppressed. The social consequences are profound. In legal settings, confident testimony sways juries, sometimes despite contradictory evidence. In interpersonal relationships, a partner's confident denials can obscure truths and foster mistrust. In the age of digital media, where misinformation spreads rapidly, the implanted certainty illusion accelerates the erosion of shared reality. Confident assertions drown out nuance, creating echo chambers where truth is subordinated to volume and conviction. Neurologically, confidence activates brain regions associated with reward and trust. Observers experience a visceral response, their brains wired to associate certainty with reliability. The implanted certainty illusion exploits this wiring, creating a feedback loop where confidence breeds trust and trust reinforces confidence. The effect is so strong that rational analysis is often overridden by emotional resonance. Yet, there is a paradox. Confidence, when genuine, arises from knowledge, preparation, and truth. The implanted certainty illusion is its counterfeit, an imitation so perfect it can fool the senses, but not the deeper mechanisms of understanding. Over time, however, the illusion can erode trust, as inconsistencies surface and dissonance grows. The very act of projecting false certainty can become a fragile house of cards, vulnerable to collapse. Understanding the implanted certainty illusion offers a crucial defense. Awareness sharpens critical thinking and encourages us to look beyond the surface performance to the substance beneath. It urges us to question not just what is said, but how it is said, to seek corroboration and remain vigilant against the seductive allure of conviction without evidence. In personal growth, the illusion reminds us that true confidence is grounded in humility and openness to correction. The genuine article admits uncertainty and embraces inquiry. The implanted certainty illusion thrives in environments that discourage doubt and reward dogma. Recognizing this distinction is vital for navigating a world where appearances often deceive. At its core, the implanted certainty illusion challenges our assumptions about truth and belief. It reveals how easily certainty can be manufactured and how dangerous it is to equate confidence with honesty. In a society where perception shapes reality, the illusion is a potent reminder that conviction alone does not guarantee truth. When someone declares a lie with absolute conviction, they wield the implanted certainty illusion. It makes deception indistinguishable from genuine belief, blurring the line between reality and performance, truth and falsehood. Understanding this illusion is not just an intellectual exercise. It is a necessary step toward preserving integrity, trust, and clarity in an increasingly complex world. The rehearsed spontaneity trap. Imagine watching someone cry. The tears well up, the voice trembles, and the face contorts with emotion. You instinctively believe these are genuine feelings, a window into the person's inner truth. But what if these tears have been practiced, rehearsed countless times in front of mirrors or under coaching? What if the very spontaneity you trust is actually a carefully crafted performance? This is the paradox at the heart of the rehearsed spontaneity trap. Practiced emotional displays can appear more authentic than genuine, spontaneous truths, making our intuition, the very tool we rely on to detect honesty, unreliable. This paradox challenges one of our most fundamental assumptions about human interaction. That emotional authenticity can be discerned through instinct, intuition, or subtle behavioral cues. We tend to believe that spontaneous reactions are truthful and rehearsed ones artificial. But modern psychology and social science reveal a far more complex reality. Humans are adept actors in the theater of emotion, capable of producing convincing displays that mimic authenticity, while genuine emotion may be misread as insincere or staged. Consider the world of politics and celebrity, where image is everything. Public figures often receive coaching to master emotional expressions, showing grief at tragedies, joy at celebrations, or anger during conflicts, in ways that appear deeply genuine to the public eye. These rehearsed emotions are polished to perfection, displayed with timing and intensity designed to resonate. Meanwhile, a candid moment of unexpected emotion might be dismissed by observers as overacting or manipulation. The public's intuition becomes a victim of this trap, fooled by the surface rather than the substance. This trap also extends to everyday relationships. Think of a friend who has learned to display certain emotions to navigate social situations: a practiced smile, a well-timed sigh, a rehearsed look of concern. These performances often arise from a need for acceptance, empathy, or self-protection. Yet, paradoxically, when they express unguarded feelings in moments of true spontaneity, these moments might be questioned or seen as atypical. Our minds, trained by repeated patterns, may distrust the authentic, confusing it for performance. Neuroscience offers insights into why this happens. Humans recognize emotions through microexpressions and subtle physiological signals, but these are often fleeting and ambiguous. Rehearsed emotional displays tend to exaggerate or emphasize these cues, making them easier to detect and interpret. Genuine emotions, more nuanced and complex, may lack the dramatic markers the brain expects, leading to misjudgment. Our cognitive shortcuts favor clarity and consistency, not subtlety and ambiguity. The rehearsed spontaneity trap creates a dangerous feedback loop in social dynamics. Those who master emotional performance gain social advantage, shaping perceptions and influencing others, while those who experience true feelings may struggle to communicate effectively. This imbalance undermines trust and complicates genuine connection. In legal contexts, this paradox can have life-altering consequences. Witnesses, victims, or defendants whose spontaneous emotional reactions differ from rehearsed or coached expressions may be judged unreliable. Jurors and judges may place undue emphasis on perceived authenticity of emotional display rather than factual evidence. The trap distorts justice, favoring appearance over reality. Social media intensifies this phenomenon. Platforms encourage curated self-presentation, where emotional moments are edited, staged, or amplified for impact. Followers learn to expect and respond to these rehearsed displays, further blurring lines between authentic and performed emotion. Our collective intuition, overwhelmed by a flood of crafted affect, becomes less trustworthy. Philosophically, the trap questions the nature of authenticity itself. If practiced emotions can evoke real feelings in both performer and observer, does the distinction between genuine and rehearsed blur? Is authenticity a fixed state or a fluid performance shaped by context and intention? The rehearsed spontaneity trap invites us to rethink how we define truth in human expression. To navigate this trap, we must cultivate deeper awareness and skepticism of surface cues. Listening beyond expressions, attending to consistency over time, contextual understanding, and verbal content becomes essential. Recognizing that intuition can mislead is the first step toward more nuanced social perception. In conclusion, the rehearsed spontaneity trap reveals the fragile nature of emotional truth in human interaction. It warns that practiced displays can convincingly masquerade as genuine, while spontaneous truths may be mistaken for artifice. Our intuition, once a reliable guide, becomes unreliable in this complex emotional landscape. Next time you witness an emotional display, whether tearful, joyful, or angry, remember the paradox. The authenticity you perceive might be rehearsed, and the spontaneous feeling might be misunderstood. In that awareness lies the possibility for deeper empathy, wiser judgment, and richer human connection. The conditional truth mechanism, truth is often seen as absolute, a fixed point in a shifting sea of opinion and belief. Yet, many statements we encounter are not absolute at all. They are conditional, true only within particular contexts, perspectives, or frames of reference. This is the essence of the conditional truth mechanism. Some statements hold true only when viewed through specific lenses, and when those lenses shift, the certainty they once carried dissolves into ambiguity and paradox. Imagine the statement, "It is cold outside." To know whether this is true, you must understand the context, location, season, time of day, and individual perception. For someone in the Arctic, 20 degrees Celsius might feel warm, while for someone in the Sahara, it might feel freezing. The statement's truth depends on where, when, and how it is considered. Change the context, and the truth changes too. This conditionality extends beyond physical facts into realms of morality, culture, and knowledge. Ethical truths often depend on cultural norms or situational factors. A behavior deemed acceptable in one society might be condemned in another. Similarly, scientific truths are provisional, valid only until new evidence shifts understanding. The conditional truth mechanism challenges the notion of absolute certainty, inviting humility and adaptability in our beliefs. Philosophically, this mechanism echoes the principle of relativism, which holds that truth is not universal but contingent on frameworks of thought, language, and experience. It reveals that many disagreements arise not from contradictions, but from differing contexts and assumptions. When context shifts, statements once held as truths may no longer apply, dissolving certainty. Consider legal systems, where truth often hinges on perspective. Witness testimonies differ, each shaped by individual experience, memory, and bias. The truth in court is thus a constructed narrative, dependent on which perspectives are accepted and how evidence is interpreted. Here, conditional truth plays a central role in justice and its challenges. In everyday life, we navigate countless conditional truths, saying, "I am happy," may be true in the moment, but false a day later. Personal identities, relationships, and emotions shift with time and circumstance, making absolute truth elusive. Recognizing this fluidity helps us embrace complexity rather than cling to rigid certainties. The conditional truth mechanism also influences communication and understanding. When interlocutors assume their truths are universal, conflicts arise. Misunderstandings multiply as parties talk past one another, each anchored in differing contexts. Awareness of conditional truth encourages empathy and openness, fostering dialogue rather than dogma. In the digital age, information often lacks context, presented as absolute facts. This amplifies confusion, as statements divorced from their conditions are misinterpreted or weaponized. Critical thinking requires us to restore context, question assumptions, and appreciate the conditional nature of many truths. Cognitively, humans tend to seek clear, unambiguous answers. The discomfort with uncertainty leads to oversimplification or denial of conditional truths. Yet, embracing this mechanism enhances intellectual flexibility, resilience, and a more nuanced grasp of reality. In conclusion, the conditional truth mechanism reveals that certainty is often provisional, dependent on shifting contexts and perspectives. It dissolves the illusion of fixed truths and invites us into a more dynamic, compassionate engagement with knowledge and belief. Next time you hold a truth as absolute, pause and ask, under what conditions does this hold? How might changing context alter its meaning? In this questioning, you find not weakness but a deeper, more authentic grasp of reality's richness. The metaphor literalization error. Language is a landscape rich with metaphor. From poetry to everyday speech, metaphors are powerful tools that shape our understanding, paint vivid pictures, and convey complex ideas through imaginative comparison. Yet, when metaphors are taken literally rather than figuratively, they give rise to a profound and perplexing confusion, an error that dissolves the boundary between illustrative truth and factual lie. This is the metaphor literalization error, a trap where language's poetic devices become sources of paradox and misunderstanding. Consider the phrase, "he is drowning in debt." Taken figuratively, it vividly expresses overwhelming financial burden. But imagine someone interpreting this literally, envisioning a person submerged in water. Such a misinterpretation collapses the intended meaning, turning metaphor into absurdity. While this example may seem trivial, in complex discourse the stakes are far higher. Metaphor literalization can distort political rhetoric, scientific communication, and cultural narratives, creating paradoxes that confound clarity. This error reveals the fragile interface between language and thought. Metaphors operate in a liminal space, relying on shared cultural knowledge and contextual cues to signal that meaning transcends literalness. When this tacit understanding breaks down, metaphors become statements of fact, or perceived as lies, triggering confusion and mistrust. The line between what is true illustratively and what is false factually becomes blurred, undermining communication. Philosophically, the metaphor literalization error challenges the nature of truth itself. Truth is often assumed to be a matter of correspondence between statements and reality. But metaphors embody a different kind of truth, a poetic or symbolic truth that illuminates rather than asserts facts. When metaphors are forced into literal interpretation, this symbolic truth is mistaken for falsehood, igniting paradoxes where something simultaneously seems true and false. Take political discourse as an arena rife with this error. Leaders and commentators employ metaphors, battles, wars, plagues, to dramatize issues. Opponents or audiences taking these metaphors literally may accuse speakers of exaggeration or deceit, failing to appreciate the figurative language. This misreading can escalate polarization as parties talk past one another, caught in a conflict of interpretation rather than substance. In scientific contexts, metaphor literalization can mislead public understanding. Terms like genetic blueprint or natural selection are metaphors that help explain complex processes. Yet, when taken literally, they invite misconceptions. Genes are not architectural plans, and natural selection is not a conscious chooser. This literalization error fuels misunderstandings that hamper education and policy debates on genetics and evolution. The cognitive mechanisms behind this error involve the dual processing of language, literal and figurative. Humans normally toggle between these modes effortlessly, guided by context and prior knowledge. However, when context is lacking or when communicators fail to signal figurativeness clearly, literal interpretation prevails and error ensues. This can lead to paradoxes where a metaphorical statement is challenged as a factual claim, resulting in confusion and conflict. Literature and art also explore this error's dramatic potential. Characters misunderstanding metaphors can reveal deeper themes of alienation, miscommunication, and the limits of language. The error dramatizes how fragile human connection is, hinging on shared interpretation and trust in symbolic meaning. Social media accelerates the metaphor literalization error. In rapid-fire communication, nuance is often lost. Sarcasm, irony, and metaphor are easily misconstrued. A metaphorical tweet can be viral fodder for outrage when read literally, sparking unnecessary conflict. This phenomenon underscores the modern challenges of maintaining clarity and empathy in public discourse. The error also invites reflection on education and literacy. Teaching critical reading and awareness of figurative language is essential to prevent metaphor literalization. Cultivating sensitivity to language's layered meanings empowers individuals to navigate complex information landscapes without falling into paradoxical misunderstanding. In conclusion, the metaphor literalization error exposes the delicate dance between language, meaning, and truth. It reminds us that metaphors, while illuminating, demand careful interpretation, lest they collapse into confusion and paradox. This error challenges us to appreciate the richness of figurative language, and to guard against the pitfalls of taking poetic truth for literal fact. Next time you encounter a vivid metaphor, pause to consider its purpose. Is it painting a picture or making a claim? In that pause lies the key to unlocking understanding, bridging the gap between illustrative truth and factual reality, and avoiding the paradox that literalization invites. The inverted accusation dynamic. In human conflict, words are weapons, and accusations often serve as the sharpest blades. But what happens when the act of accusing someone of lying becomes itself a lie? This is the heart of the inverted accusation dynamic, a tangled psychological and social paradox where defense and offense blur and truth becomes impossible to discern. In this entangled dance, the very attempt to expose deceit may mask deception, turning accuser and accused into a mirror of suspicion and contradiction. The dynamic plays out in many arenas: personal relationships, politics, media, and legal battles, where the power to accuse carries enormous weight. An accusation of lying traditionally undermines the accused's credibility, positioning the accuser as the bearer of truth. Yet, when the accusation itself is false, it weaponizes mistrust and manipulates perception, creating a recursive loop of doubt where roles of victim and villain intertwine. Consider a political scandal where one party accuses another of fabricating facts. If the accusation is truthful, it serves justice and clarity, but if it is false, it becomes a strategic ploy to derail investigation and discredit opponents. The public is left navigating conflicting claims, struggling to parse truth from manipulation. The accuser, through lying about lying, gains a tactical advantage, sowing confusion and protecting their interests. In personal conflicts, the inverted accusation dynamic corrodes trust and communication. A partner might falsely accuse the other of dishonesty to deflect from their own misdeeds. This reversal fosters resentment and cycles of accusation and denial, with each party claiming victimhood. The interplay of genuine and false accusations creates a labyrinth where emotional clarity dissolves and relationships fracture. Psychologically, this dynamic leverages cognitive biases such as the false consensus effect and confirmation bias. Accusers who falsely claim deceit exploit listeners' tendency to believe their perspective aligns with a majority or with prior beliefs. The repeated framing of opponents as liars shapes public opinion, regardless of factual accuracy. This manipulation exploits the human mind's preference for coherent narratives over messy ambiguity. The legal system is also vulnerable. False accusations of lying can derail trials, intimidate witnesses, and obscure facts. Defendants and lawyers alike must navigate this fraught landscape where accusations may serve as both shield and sword. Courts grapple with discerning when an accusation is a truthful challenge or a deceptive attack, often relying on evidence that itself may be contested. Philosophically, the inverted accusation dynamic exposes the instability of truth in adversarial contexts. It illustrates how language and accusation are performative acts that shape reality, not merely reflect it. The accusation of lying becomes a meta-lie, a linguistic tool that creates paradoxical uncertainty about who holds the truth. Media and social platforms amplify this paradox. The speed and scale of information flow enable false accusations to spread rapidly, coloring public discourse before facts can emerge. The spectacle of accusation captures attention and shapes narratives, often sidelining sober investigation. In this environment, distinguishing genuine claims from strategic deception becomes a critical challenge. To escape the trap of the inverted accusation dynamic requires vigilance and critical thinking. Audiences must demand evidence, context, and consistency, resisting the impulse to accept accusations at face value. Speakers and leaders bear responsibility to communicate transparently, avoiding manipulative reversals that undermine collective trust. Ultimately, this dynamic reveals the fragile architecture of trust and truth. When accusations themselves become suspect, the foundation of discourse trembles, the line between defender and attacker blurs, and the pursuit of clarity demands patience, skepticism, and a commitment to uncovering reality beneath the tangled words. Next time you hear someone accused of lying, pause and ask, who benefits from this accusation? Could the charge itself be a weapon of deception? In that pause lies the power to see through the inverted web of lies and accusations, and to seek the elusive truth beyond. The disinformation saturation effect. In the modern age, information is abundant, an endless torrent cascading into our minds from countless sources. Yet, this deluge has a paradoxical effect. Instead of illuminating truth, overwhelming quantities of conflicting details exhaust our ability to discern fact from fiction. This is the disinformation saturation effect, a psychological phenomenon where the sheer volume and contradiction of information paralyze judgment, making any statement, whether true or false, seem equally plausible. Imagine standing in the middle of a storm, rain pelting down from every direction, each drop a piece of data, a claim, or a counterclaim. Your senses struggle to make sense of the chaos. The mind, overwhelmed, retreats, unable to separate meaningful signals from noise. In this state of saturation, certainty dissolves, replaced by confusion, doubt, and often apathy. This effect is not new, but it has escalated dramatically in the digital era. The internet, social media, and 24-hour news cycles deliver an unfiltered flood of perspectives, rumors, and outright falsehoods. Algorithms amplify sensational and contradictory content, fueling echo chambers and fragmented realities. In this environment, discerning truth becomes an exhausting task, often abandoned altogether. The disinformation saturation effect exploits cognitive limits. Human brains have finite attention and processing capacity. Faced with an overload of information, mental shortcuts and heuristics take over, leading to simplified but unreliable judgments. The result is a mental fatigue where skepticism wears thin and all narratives blur together, eroding trust in knowledge itself. Consider political landscapes saturated with conflicting claims about events, policies, or leaders. Voters face mountains of contradictory data, each side accusing the other of deceit. As the cacophony rises, many retreat into cynicism or tribal allegiance, accepting whichever narrative aligns with their identity rather than objective reality. This fractures societies, undermining democratic discourse. In health communication, the effect has life or death consequences. During pandemics, waves of misinformation, conspiracy theories, and changing guidelines swamp public understanding. The conflicting advice fatigues the public, leading to skepticism, non-compliance, and increased risk. Here, saturation directly impairs the ability to act on truth. Media literacy becomes crucial in combating this effect. Recognizing sources, evaluating evidence, and questioning narratives help pierce the fog. Yet, the very design of digital platforms often discourages deep engagement, favoring quick consumption that feeds saturation. The challenge is systemic, demanding both individual vigilance and structural reform. Psychologically, the disinformation saturation effect fuels anxiety and helplessness. Uncertainty about what to believe triggers stress responses, leading some to disengage entirely or embrace simple but false explanations. This cycle perpetuates misinformation's grip, as doubt becomes fertile ground for manipulation. Philosophically, the effect questions the nature of truth in an age of information overload. If all statements feel equally plausible, does truth lose meaning? Or does this crisis demand a redefinition of knowledge as an active communal process of verification and dialogue? Education, transparency, and technological innovation offer paths forward. Encouraging critical thinking, promoting fact-checking, and designing platforms that prioritize clarity over sensationalism can mitigate saturation. Social trust and expertise in institutions must be rebuilt to anchor collective discernment. In conclusion, the disinformation saturation effect reveals a profound modern paradox. The abundance of information, intended to enlighten, can overwhelm and obscure, making truth elusive. It warns us to guard our cognitive limits, cultivate skepticism, and strive for clarity amidst the noise. Next time you feel overwhelmed by conflicting claims, remember that confusion is the trap. Pause, seek reliable sources, and embrace patience. In resisting saturation, you reclaim the power to discern truth in a world flooded with competing realities. The self-invalidation strategy. Imagine a person who, in the midst of a serious conversation or a heated debate, suddenly declares, "I might be lying." This simple phrase, loaded with ambiguity and doubt, acts like an intellectual smokescreen. It dissolves the certainty of everything previously said, turning clear statements into a fog of uncertainty. This is the essence of the self-invalidation strategy, a powerful and subtle tactic where the speaker undermines their own words, not by disproving them directly, but by casting a shadow of doubt so profound that no claim can stand unchallenged. At first glance, saying, "I might be lying," may seem like an act of honesty or humility. It suggests openness to error, a willingness to question one's own truth. But in practice, this phrase often serves a very different purpose. It becomes a shield against accountability, a way to evade scrutiny by eroding the foundation of trust. When every statement is wrapped in the possibility of deceit, listeners are left grasping for certainty that never arrives. The self-invalidation strategy destabilizes communication by attacking the principle of veracity itself. Language, at its core, relies on the assumption that speakers intend to convey truth, or at least are willing to be judged by the truthfulness of their words. But when a speaker preemptively admits to possible lying, they withdraw from this implicit contract. Their statements become unmoored from reality, floating in a sea of doubt that renders meaningful dialogue nearly impossible. Consider how this tactic plays out in real-life scenarios. In interpersonal relationships, a person might use this phrase to deflect uncomfortable questions or avoid confrontation. By suggesting their words might not be trustworthy, they subtly discourage follow-up, planting confusion that shields them from deeper inquiry. This can be a form of emotional manipulation, where uncertainty itself becomes a weapon. In legal or political arenas, the self-invalidation strategy can be devastating. Imagine a witness or official who responds to probing questions with, "I might be lying." Such a statement corrodes the credibility not only of individual claims, but of entire testimonies. It sows doubt so deeply that facts lose their foothold. Jurors, voters, or observers are left stranded between skepticism and despair, unsure of what to believe. Psychologically, this strategy exploits the discomfort humans feel with ambiguity. Our brains crave coherent narratives and reliable information. The declaration, "I might be lying," injects noise into this cognitive process, disrupting pattern recognition and decision-making. This disruption can paralyze judgment, delaying conclusions or fostering indecision. Philosophically, the self-invalidation strategy touches on profound questions about truth, knowledge, and belief. It echoes the skeptical challenges posed by thinkers who question whether we can ever truly know anything. But unlike philosophical skepticism, which is a methodical inquiry, this strategy is often deployed pragmatically to avoid responsibility or obfuscate reality. The strategy also parallels logical paradoxes, such as the liar paradox, where statements about their own truthfulness create loops of contradiction. By introducing doubt about the speaker's honesty, the self-invalidation strategy mimics this paradox in conversational form, trapping interlocutors in endless uncertainty. Socially, widespread use of this tactic can erode communal trust. If speakers routinely hedge their statements with possible deceit, the fabric of communication unravels. People become cynical, dialogue deteriorates, and consensus becomes unreachable. The result is fragmentation and isolation, as trust, the glue of society, crumbles. In digital communication, the self-invalidation strategy manifests as vague disclaimers, maybe statements, and ironic detachment. Online debates often become mired in such uncertainty, where every claim is qualified with a "I might be wrong" or "just saying," making it difficult to find common ground or factual clarity. To guard against this trap, listeners must cultivate discernment and resilience. Recognizing when self-invalidation is used manipulatively is key. Demanding clarity, consistency, and accountability can help break through the smokescreen. At the same time, speakers should be mindful of the impact of such phrases and strive for honest, direct communication. Ultimately, the self-invalidation strategy reveals how language can be weaponized not just through lies, but through doubt. It reminds us that uncertainty, when used strategically, can be as powerful as deception. In a world increasingly saturated with conflicting information, understanding this tactic is vital for preserving truth and meaningful connection. Next time you hear someone say, "I might be lying," pause and reflect on its deeper implications. Is it a humble admission or a deliberate shield? In that moment lies a test of your judgment, your patience, and your commitment to seeking clarity amidst ambiguity. The contrarian veracity principle. In human nature lies a powerful impulse: skepticism toward authority. This impulse often serves as a vital safeguard against manipulation and deceit. Yet, when taken to an extreme, it gives rise to a paradoxical trap, the contrarian veracity principle. This principle describes how automatically doubting whatever authority claims can invert reality itself, flipping genuine truths into assumed lies and creating a web of inverse bias that ensnares both minds and societies. At first glance, questioning authority seems rational, even necessary. History is rife with examples where unquestioning acceptance of official narratives led to injustice, oppression, or catastrophe. Critical inquiry, dissent, and skepticism fuel progress and protect freedom. However, the contrarian veracity principle warns of the dangers when skepticism becomes reflexive, turning into outright denial or contrarianism, regardless of evidence. Imagine a scientist presenting overwhelming data on climate change. Instead of engaging with the facts, some reject the message outright solely because it comes from an established institution or expert. The truth, clear and supported by evidence, becomes dismissed as propaganda or conspiracy. This automatic doubt distorts perception, creating an inverse bias where the source, not the content, dictates belief. This trap extends beyond science to politics, medicine, and media. When distrust of authority hardens into ideology, entire segments of society adopt contrarian views that reject mainstream knowledge wholesale. The result is fragmentation, where communities inhabit separate realities shaped less by evidence and more by opposition to perceived authority. Psychologically, the contrarian veracity principle exploits cognitive biases such as reactance, the urge to resist control, and motivated reasoning, where beliefs are shaped by desires rather than facts. Automatic doubt fulfills emotional needs for autonomy and identity, but at the cost of distorting truth. This principle also fuels the rise of misinformation and conspiracy theories. Inverse bias makes individuals susceptible to alternative narratives that position themselves as truths suppressed by mainstream powers. The allure of hidden knowledge and rebellion against authority reinforces contrarian beliefs, deepening societal divides. Philosophically, the contrarian veracity principle challenges the balance between healthy skepticism and cynicism. It questions how we discern when to trust and when to doubt, highlighting the fragility of epistemic frameworks. Truth becomes a moving target, defined less by correspondence to reality than by allegiance to or rejection of authority. Media and social platforms amplify this dynamic. Algorithms prioritize sensationalism and controversy, rewarding content that challenges or mocks authority, regardless of accuracy. This environment fosters echo chambers where contrarian views flourish unchecked, undermining public discourse and shared understanding. Navigating this trap requires cultivating nuanced critical thinking. Skepticism should be applied thoughtfully, assessing evidence and context rather than reflexively rejecting claims based on source alone. Encouraging dialogue that bridges trust and inquiry can help rebuild the fragile social contract around truth. In conclusion, the contrarian veracity principle reveals how the noble impulse to question authority can, unchecked, invert reality, turning truth into assumed lies. It warns against reflexive doubt that fractures knowledge and society, urging balance between trust and skepticism. Next time you hear an authoritative claim, pause to consider not just who says it, but what is said and why. Recognize the power and peril of automatic doubt, and strive for understanding beyond bias, seeking truth in the complex dance between authority and inquiry. The earnest fraud paradox. In the shadowy world of deception, there exists a profound and unsettling paradox, the earnest fraud paradox. It describes the curious case of a con artist who becomes so immersed in their own deception that the lines between sincerity and fraud dissolve entirely. In this tangled state, the very distinction between honest belief and calculated deceit becomes meaningless, leaving observers and victims alike in a fog of uncertainty. At first glance, a con artist is a manipulator, knowingly fabricating stories to exploit others. Their actions are deliberate, their falsehoods crafted to convince and control. But when the deception is internalized, when the con artist genuinely believes their own lies, the dynamics shift dramatically. The performance is no longer just an act. It becomes an earnest expression of a self-constructed reality. This paradox challenges our fundamental understanding of truth and authenticity. We tend to categorize people as either sincere or deceitful, but the earnest fraud paradox reveals a complex middle ground where those categories collapse. The con artist's belief in their own narrative blurs the boundary, creating a psychological labyrinth where honesty and fraud coexist indistinguishably. Consider historical figures and infamous fraudsters who, despite perpetrating grand deceptions, seemed genuinely convinced of their stories. Their conviction added persuasive power, making their lies harder to detect. Victims were drawn not just to the falsehoods, but to the apparent authenticity behind them. The paradox amplifies the manipulative force of deception by intertwining it with genuine belief. Psychologically, this phenomenon relates to cognitive dissonance and self-deception. To maintain the intricate facade, the con artist must align their self-perception with their false narrative. This alignment reduces internal conflict and sustains the deception over time. In doing so, they embody a paradoxical authenticity that confounds traditional judgments. The earnest fraud paradox has implications beyond individual scammers. It resonates in social, political, and cultural spheres, where leaders or movements promote narratives they themselves may partially believe. When deception merges with conviction, it complicates accountability and fuels polarized realities. Followers may also adopt the constructed belief sincerely, perpetuating cycles of fraud and faith. Philosophically, this paradox probes the nature of belief and truth. It raises questions about whether sincerity depends on factual accuracy or subjective conviction. The earnest fraud blurs these categories, suggesting that truth is not only about external facts, but also about internal acceptance. This challenges binary notions of honest and dishonest, inviting more nuanced perspectives. In legal and ethical contexts, the paradox complicates assessments of intent and culpability. If a perpetrator genuinely believes their deceit, traditional frameworks that hinge on knowing falsehoods may falter. This raises difficult questions about responsibility and the boundaries of self-delusion versus manipulation. Media and popular culture frequently explore this paradox, portraying characters whose lies become their reality. These narratives captivate because they reflect deep human truths about identity, belief, and the fluidity of truth. The earnest fraud paradox fascinates because it reveals the fragile, often contradictory nature of human consciousness. To navigate this paradox, both individuals and societies must develop critical awareness. Recognizing the possibility of self-deceptive fraud requires empathy combined with vigilance. It calls for careful evaluation of claims, motives, and contexts, avoiding simplistic labels. In conclusion, the earnest fraud paradox unveils a disturbing but compelling aspect of deception, the fusion of earnest belief and fraudulent intent. It dissolves the clear lines between sincerity and deceit, challenging how we understand truth, identity, and trust. Next time you encounter a story that feels both convincing and dubious, consider the paradox at play. The teller may be trapped in their own web of lies and belief, blurring the line where fraud ends and earnestness begins. In that ambiguity lies a profound human mystery, reflecting the complex dance of truth and deception within us all. The memory reconstruction glitch. Memory is often thought of as a reliable archive, a vault where the past is stored safely and accurately. Yet, modern neuroscience reveals a startling truth. Every time you remember something, you don't merely retrieve a static record, you reconstruct it. Each act of recall rewrites the memory, altering details subtly or profoundly. This phenomenon, known as the memory reconstruction glitch, means that the memories you hold most confidently may actually be your most fictional creations. Imagine reaching back into your mind to recall a childhood birthday. You see faces, hear laughter, smell cake. But with each recollection, your brain pieces together the fragments anew, filling gaps with imagination, emotions, and external influences. Over time, the memory morphs, shaped by your current beliefs, desires, and experiences. What feels like an unshakable truth is, in fact, a fluid narrative, ever-changing, often unknowingly altered. This glitch challenges the very foundation of how we understand ourselves and our past. Memories shape identity, inform decisions, and ground our reality. If memories are malleable, the certainty we place in them becomes precarious. The vividness and confidence of a memory are not guarantees of accuracy. Rather, they can mask distortions or fabrications. Psychologists have demonstrated this through experiments where participants' memories are altered by suggestion, misinformation, or social pressure. People confidently recall events that never happened or misremember critical details. This reveals that memory is not a passive playback, but an active, reconstructive process vulnerable to errors. The memory reconstruction glitch also explains phenomena like false memories, where individuals vividly recall traumatic or significant events inaccurately. These memories can influence emotions and behavior as powerfully as genuine ones, complicating therapeutic and legal contexts. Eyewitness testimonies, once considered gold standard evidence, are now understood to be susceptible to these reconstructive errors. At a neurological level, memory involves networks that encode, store, and retrieve information. Recall activates these networks, but also makes them plastic, open to modification. Emotional states, context, and subsequent experiences all influence how memories are re-encoded. This dynamic system is adaptive, it allows learning and updating, but also prone to glitches that blur fact and fiction. The glitch has profound philosophical implications. It raises questions about the nature of personal identity and reality. If our memories, the threads that weave our narrative self, are fluid and fallible, then who are we really? How can we trust our sense of continuity over time? The memory reconstruction glitch invites humility in claims about the past and openness to reinterpretation. Socially, this glitch influences how history and collective memory are constructed. Shared narratives evolve as individual memories interact, reshape, and reinforce each other. This collective memory can be powerful, but also malleable, subject to reinterpretation, omission, or myth-making. In literature and art, the glitch inspires explorations of unreliable narrators and fragmented recollections, reflecting human uncertainty and the elusive nature of truth. It resonates deeply because it captures the fragile, often subjective fabric of lived experience. Technological advances in brain imaging and cognitive science continue to uncover the mechanisms behind this glitch, offering potential ways to understand and perhaps mitigate memory distortions. However, the inherent plasticity of memory is unlikely to be fully overcome, a reminder of the mind's complexity. In conclusion, the memory reconstruction glitch reveals that our memories are not static archives, but living stories, rewritten each time we recall them. This means our most certain recollections may be the most fictional, crafted by the mind's reconstructive processes. Next time you revisit a memory, remember that it is not a fixed truth, but a fluid narrative shaped by countless influences. Embrace the uncertainty, for in this lies the richness of human experience, imperfect, evolving, and deeply personal. The epistemic closure trap. In the landscape of human knowledge, openness is essential. The willingness to revise beliefs in light of new evidence forms the bedrock of understanding and progress. Yet, there exists a profound cognitive pitfall known as the epistemic closure trap, a state where a person's worldview becomes so rigid, so impervious, that any counter-evidence is dismissed by default. In this closed loop, no new truth can enter, no matter how compelling or undeniable. Imagine a fortress surrounded by walls so high and thick that nothing from the outside can breach it. Inside, inhabitants remain confident in their knowledge, shielded from contradiction. This metaphor captures the essence of epistemic closure, a mental barrier that isolates beliefs from the corrective influence of reality. The trap manifests when individuals or groups develop belief systems that include the premise, if something contradicts my worldview, it must be false. This circular logic immunizes the worldview against challenge, making it unfalsifiable. As a result, the pursuit of truth becomes subordinated to the preservation of belief. Psychologically, the trap exploits cognitive biases like confirmation bias, the tendency to favor information that confirms existing beliefs, and motivated reasoning, where conclusions are drawn to satisfy emotional needs rather than objective analysis. Together, these biases harden the walls of epistemic closure. This trap is visible across ideological, political, and religious divides. For example, a person deeply committed to a political ideology may reject factual reports that contradict their narrative, labeling them as fake news or propaganda without genuine engagement. The result is polarization, where communities inhabit separate realities, each convinced of their own correctness. The epistemic closure trap also poses challenges to science and education. When skepticism becomes dogmatism, scientific consensus can be dismissed as conspiracy. This undermines public trust and impedes collective responses to crises such as climate change or pandemics. Philosophically, the trap challenges the ideal of fallibilism, the recognition that all knowledge is provisional and subject to revision. Epistemic closure denies fallibilism, entrenching certainty in place of inquiry. It transforms belief into ideology, closing minds rather than opening them. Social media amplifies this dynamic by creating echo chambers and filter bubbles, where algorithms feed users information aligning with their views, reinforcing closure. The reinforcement makes departure from established beliefs uncomfortable or socially costly. Escaping the trap requires intellectual humility, the courage to question one's own beliefs, and the openness to be wrong. Dialogue that respects differing perspectives without immediate dismissal can chip away at closure. Critical thinking skills and exposure to diverse viewpoints are vital tools. In conclusion, the epistemic closure trap reveals how rigid worldviews can imprison minds, rejecting new truths by definition. It is a warning against dogmatism and a call to embrace the provisional nature of knowledge. Next time you encounter a belief you hold dearly, ask yourself, am I open to challenge, or have I built walls that no truth can cross? In that reflection lies the path to growth, understanding, and genuine wisdom. The suspicion spiral effect. In human interaction, trust is a fragile thread, easily frayed by doubt. The suspicion spiral effect captures a pernicious cycle where doubting a truthful statement provokes defensiveness that appears deceptive, which in turn fuels further doubt, trapping all involved in an endless loop of mutual suspicion. Imagine a conversation where one person, despite the other's honest words, questions their truthfulness. The accused, feeling unfairly challenged, reacts defensively, voice raised, explanations hurried, emotions flaring. To the doubter, these signs resemble evasion or dishonesty, reinforcing their mistrust. This reaction triggers more defensiveness, escalating tension and deepening the suspicion spiral. This effect reveals the precarious dynamics of communication, where intentions are misread and authenticity is obscured by the emotional fog of distrust. The paradox lies in the fact that genuine truthfulness can be mistaken for deceit simply because it is doubted. Psychologically, the suspicion spiral effect exploits confirmation bias and the threat response. Doubt activates anxiety, making the accused hyper-aware and reactive. Their natural defensive behavior, intended to clarify honesty, inadvertently signals guilt to the doubter. This misinterpretation fuels the cycle, escalating conflict. This spiral is evident in many arenas: personal relationships where accusations erode intimacy, workplace disputes where mistrust stifles collaboration, and legal settings where interrogations can coerce nervous defensiveness mistaken for lying. In each case, the spiral damages trust and obstructs resolution. Socially, the effect highlights how fragile truth is in contested spaces. When suspicion dominates, even factual statements struggle to gain acceptance. This can fracture communities, polarize groups, and inhibit collective action. The media and social platforms amplify suspicion spirals by broadcasting conflict and emphasizing controversy. Public figures caught in suspicion cycles face amplified scrutiny, where every defensive act deepens public doubt, regardless of truth. To break free from this spiral, participants must cultivate patience, empathy, and calm communication. Doubters should consider alternative explanations for defensiveness. Those accused should strive for composure and transparency. Establishing shared norms for dialogue and trust building can prevent escalation. In conclusion, the suspicion spiral effect is a vivid illustration of how doubt and defensiveness can create a self-perpetuating loop that obscures truth and corrodes trust. It warns us to approach doubt and response with care, lest we become trapped in endless cycles of suspicion. Next time you feel doubt rising, remember how your reaction might fuel the spiral. Seek understanding before judgment. In that mindful pause lies the power to preserve trust and uncover truth amidst the swirling fog of suspicion. The recursive allegation, paradox. If you accuse each other of lying without evidence, you generate a reality where neither can prove anything at all. This is the essence of the recursive allegation paradox, a tangled web of mutual distrust so profound that it erodes the very foundations of truth, logic, and communication. When accusations fly without grounding, they trap both parties in an endless cycle of denial and suspicion, where proof becomes impossible and reality itself fractures into uncertainty. Imagine two individuals locked in a verbal battle, each charging the other with dishonesty. Without any objective evidence, these accusations are merely echoes bouncing back and forth, amplifying doubt rather than resolving it. Each denial is met with another allegation, and every attempt to establish truth dissolves into defensive rhetoric. The conversation becomes a maze with no exit, where facts are overshadowed by the spectacle of accusation. This paradox reveals a fundamental fragility in human interaction. Trust is not automatic but constructed, maintained by shared standards of evidence and reason. When those standards collapse under the weight of baseless claims, the social contract fractures. Neither side can assert truth without facing immediate counterattack, leaving all statements suspended in limbo. Historically, this paradox plays out in political arenas, where factions weaponize accusations to delegitimize opponents. Campaigns may become less about policy and more about casting doubt, where the truth is secondary to the damage inflicted by suspicion. The public, caught in this fog, grows cynical and disengaged, unable to discern fact from fabrication. In personal relationships, the recursive allegation trap can destroy bonds. Couples or friends caught in cycles of accusing and denying without foundation create emotional deadlocks. Communication breaks down, empathy recedes, and connection fades. Here, the paradox manifests as emotional paralysis, where neither party can move forward because the ground of trust has vanished. Psychologically, the paradox exploits cognitive biases such as negativity bias and attribution errors. Humans tend to give more weight to negative information, and accusations trigger defensive mechanisms that obscure objective judgment. This feedback loop magnifies distrust, making reconciliation elusive. The paradox also challenges the very nature of proof. In law and science, evidence underpins claims and conclusions. But when accusations are made absent evidence, the default shifts to skepticism without resolution. The burden of proof becomes weaponized, and the principle that one is innocent until proven guilty is inverted into guilt assumed without cause. Media and social platforms intensify the paradox by providing arenas for rapid, widespread, and often unverified accusations. Viral outrage can thrive on recursive allegations, where fact-checking struggles to keep pace. The resulting noise clouds public discourse, undermining confidence in institutions and expertise. Philosophically, the recursive allegation paradox probes the limits of epistemology, the study of knowledge. It demonstrates how social consensus and rational standards are essential for establishing truth. Without them, knowledge becomes fragmented, subjective, and contested endlessly. To escape this trap requires commitment to principles of evidence, patience, and open dialogue. Both accusers and accused must prioritize clarity over conquest, seeking understanding rather than victory. Societies must foster environments where accusations are responsibly made and carefully examined, preserving the integrity of truth. In conclusion, the recursive allegation paradox exposes how unfounded accusations spiral into a reality devoid of proof, paralyzing communication and eroding trust. It warns of the destructive power of baseless doubt and highlights the necessity of evidence and reasoned discourse. Next time you witness or participate in heated accusations without evidence, pause to consider the paradox unfolding. Recognize the peril of endless allegation cycles and choose instead to build bridges of trust grounded in truth and mutual respect. In this choice lies the path back from chaos to clarity, from doubt to understanding. The semantic drift illusion. Language is our primary tool for understanding and communicating reality. Yet, it is not a fixed system. Words, meanings, and interpretations evolve continuously. The semantic drift illusion describes the subtle and often unnoticed shifts in meaning over time that can transform yesterday's truth into today's unintentional lie. This phenomenon reveals how the fluidity of language can create paradoxes of truth, misunderstanding, and unintentional deception. Imagine a word you use daily, a term seemingly straightforward and clear. Yet, as years pass, cultural changes, technological advances, and societal transformations alter the nuances of that word. The meaning shifts incrementally like a slow tide reshaping the coastline. What was once an accurate statement can, without anyone realizing, become misleading or false simply because the semantic context has moved. Take, for example, the word gay. Historically, it meant joyful or carefree. Today, it predominantly refers to sexual orientation. If someone in the past described a person as gay in the older sense, their statement was truthful. But if that same sentence is heard today without historical context, it might be misunderstood or even considered inaccurate. This illustrates how semantic drift creates illusions of truth and falsehood depending on temporal perspective. The semantic drift illusion is not just about words, but about entire conceptual frameworks. Legal, scientific, and ethical terms undergo changes that affect interpretation. Laws passed decades ago may use language whose contemporary meaning differs, causing unintended consequences or confusion. Scientific terminology evolves with knowledge, so old descriptions may no longer fit current understanding, leading to apparent contradictions. Philosophically, this illusion challenges the assumption that language is a stable vessel for truth. It reveals that truth is often entangled with linguistic context, which is itself dynamic. Statements anchored to language are therefore subject to reinterpretation as semantics drift, making fixed truths elusive. In everyday communication, this illusion can cause misunderstandings and conflict. When interlocutors unconsciously operate with different semantic frameworks, they may talk past each other, each believing their statements true. The result is frustration, miscommunication, and at times accusations of dishonesty or ignorance. Cognitively, humans tend to assume constancy in meaning, a necessary simplification for efficient communication. This assumption makes semantic drift largely invisible until the divergence becomes too great to ignore. At that point, the illusion shatters, exposing the fluid nature of meaning. The media and digital culture accelerate semantic change by introducing new terms rapidly and repurposing existing ones. Memes, slang, and jargon evolve fast, creating generational and cultural divides in language use. This intensifies the semantic drift illusion, complicating mutual understanding across communities. Educational systems face the challenge of teaching language as both stable and evolving. Awareness of semantic drift helps learners appreciate the nuances of interpretation and the importance of context. It also encourages humility when confronting disagreements rooted in linguistic change rather than factual dispute. Historically, semantic drift has influenced political discourse and ideology. Words like liberal, conservative, or freedom have shifted meanings, reshaping debates and alliances. The illusion complicates political dialogue, where parties may unknowingly use the same words with divergent meanings, deepening polarization. In conclusion, the semantic drift illusion reveals the mutable nature of language and its profound impact on truth. It warns us that yesterday's truthful statements can become today's unintentional lies simply through the slow drift of meaning. This insight invites patience, contextual awareness, and continuous reflection in our use of language. Next time you hear a familiar word or phrase that seems oddly out of place, consider the possibility of semantic drift. Recognize that meaning evolves, and with it, our grasp of truth. Embracing this fluidity enriches communication and deepens understanding across time and culture. The impossible verification dilemma. In the quest for truth, verification is king. We seek evidence, corroboration, and transparency to distinguish fact from fiction. But what happens when verifying a claim demands access to information that is fundamentally unattainable? This is the heart of the impossible verification dilemma, a paradox where truth and lie collapse into permanent uncertainty because the crucial evidence lies beyond reach. Imagine someone makes a bold claim about an event, a secret, or an experience, but the evidence needed to confirm or refute it is inaccessible, locked behind closed doors, lost in time, or concealed by design. Without verification, belief becomes a gamble. Is the claim truthful or deceitful? Reason alone offers no definitive answer. The boundary between truth and falsehood dissolves, replaced by an endless fog of doubt. This dilemma is not merely theoretical. It surfaces in many real-world contexts. In intelligence and espionage, many truths remain unverifiable because they are classified. Citizens must trust governments or agencies whose actions and information are shrouded in secrecy. The tension between security and transparency fuels skepticism and conspiracy theories, as the impossible verification dilemma leaves room for doubt that cannot be dispelled. In history, the dilemma appears when evidence is lost or destroyed. Eyewitness accounts differ, documents disappear, and memories fade. Scholars reconstruct events from incomplete fragments, aware that some truths may never be confirmed. The past becomes a landscape of probability and interpretation rather than certainty. Philosophically, the dilemma challenges epistemology, the study of knowledge, by exposing limits on what can be known. It underscores that some truths lie beyond human reach, not due to lack of effort, but due to structural barriers. This raises questions about the nature of belief, trust, and the criteria for accepting claims without verification. In everyday life, the dilemma emerges in personal relationships and social interactions. When confronted with unverifiable claims, stories, promises, or confessions, people must decide whether to trust or doubt without concrete proof. These choices shape relationships and social cohesion, highlighting the human need for trust in the absence of certainty. Psychologically, the dilemma exploits cognitive discomfort with ambiguity. Humans crave closure and certainty, yet the impossible nature of verification forces acceptance of uncertainty. This can lead to anxiety, skepticism, or, conversely, credulity born of hope or desire. The dilemma also manifests in digital communication and misinformation. Claims about events, identities, or data can be impossible to verify rapidly online. This creates fertile ground for rumors and falsehoods to spread unchecked, eroding public discourse and trust. Legal systems struggle with similar issues when evidence is incomplete or inaccessible. Courts must weigh claims carefully, balancing the presumption of innocence with the lack of definitive proof. The dilemma complicates justice, requiring standards of proof and procedural safeguards. To navigate the impossible verification dilemma, individuals and societies must cultivate intellectual humility, critical thinking, and trust frameworks that acknowledge uncertainty. Recognizing the limits of verification helps manage expectations and guides responsible judgment. In conclusion, the impossible verification dilemma reveals a fundamental challenge in discerning truth. When verification is impossible, truth and lie merge into an enduring uncertainty. It calls for patience, nuanced understanding, and a cautious approach to belief. Next time you face a claim that cannot be verified, remember the dilemma at its core. Embrace the uncertainty with thoughtful skepticism, knowing that some truths may remain forever just beyond reach, yet still worthy of careful consideration. The counterfeit candor phenomenon. In the complex dance of human communication, honesty is prized as a beacon of trust. Yet, there exists a perplexing paradox. Some lies are cloaked in such overwhelming transparency, through oversharing, disclaimers, and emotional displays, that they feel more genuine than the most sincere confession. This is the counterfeit candor phenomenon, where deceit masquerades as authenticity so convincingly that it confounds intuition and judgment. Imagine a person confessing to a misdeed. They speak at length, revealing intimate details, emotions raw and unfiltered, punctuated by disclaimers like, "I'm telling you this because I trust you," or "I want to be completely honest." These layers of openness create a facade of vulnerability and truthfulness. Yet beneath this veneer may lie carefully crafted falsehoods designed to manipulate perception, gain sympathy, or evade blame. This phenomenon exploits our psychological tendencies. Humans are wired to associate detailed disclosure and emotional expression with sincerity. Oversharing can disarm skepticism, making listeners more receptive and less guarded. Disclaimers preempt doubt by framing the speaker as candid and trustworthy. Emotional displays tap into empathy, anchoring belief in feelings rather than facts. The counterfeit candor phenomenon challenges the assumption that transparency guarantees truth. In reality, transparency can be weaponized, transforming the act of confession into a strategic performance. This strategy can be seen in various contexts, from personal relationships to political scandals, from corporate crises to social media interactions. Consider high-profile cases where public figures offer extensive, emotionally charged apologies. The sheer volume of detail and apparent remorse often persuades audiences of their honesty. Yet, investigations sometimes reveal these admissions as calculated narratives, designed to restore image rather than convey truth. The line between genuine repentance and performative candor blurs. In interpersonal relationships, this phenomenon complicates trust. A partner may inundate the other with confessions and emotional displays, masking deceit or deflecting accountability. The recipient, overwhelmed by the apparent openness, may suspend judgment, only to discover betrayal later. The paradox lies in how excessive candor can obscure rather than reveal reality. Psychologically, this phenomenon relates to impression management and emotional manipulation. It leverages social scripts about honesty and vulnerability to influence perception. The counterfeiter's skill lies in calibrating transparency to appear authentic without risking exposure. The media and digital culture amplify the counterfeit candor phenomenon. Social platforms encourage sharing personal narratives and raw emotions. Yet, the performative aspect of online disclosure can facilitate deception, cloaked in apparent honesty. Audiences, flooded with such content, struggle to discern genuine from counterfeit candor. Philosophically, the phenomenon raises questions about authenticity. If a lie feels more genuine than a confession, what does authenticity mean? Is it rooted in objective truth, subjective experience, or social perception? The counterfeit candor phenomenon exposes the fragility of these concepts. To navigate this paradox, listeners must cultivate critical empathy, balancing emotional engagement with analytical scrutiny. Recognizing that transparency can be a tool of deception encourages vigilance without cynicism. In conclusion, the counterfeit candor phenomenon reveals how lies wrapped in transparency can deceive more deeply than straightforward falsehoods. It warns that authenticity is not guaranteed by openness alone, and calls for nuanced discernment in interpreting candor. Next time you encounter a confession saturated with detail and emotion, pause to consider the possibility of counterfeit candor. In that pause lies the wisdom to see beyond the veil, honoring truth without being blind to deception.